When a widow with 11 cents finds bread on her doorstep, she thinks it's pity. When it keeps coming, she thinks it's charity. But when the silent stranger who leaves it refuses to take payment, refuses to explain, and refuses to leave, she realizes it might be something far more dangerous. In a town built on dust and broken promises, Evelyn Cross is about to learn that sometimes the greatest threat isn't hunger, it's hope. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The morning Evelyn Cross counted her last 11 cents, the sun hadn't bothered to rise yet. She sat at the kitchen table in darkness because lighting the lamp cost kerosene, and kerosene cost money she didn't have. The coins made small sounds against the warped wood, 2 nickels and a penny that had worn so smooth Abe Lincoln's face looked like a ghost. Outside, the Wyoming wind pushed against the cabin walls with the persistence of a bill collector. Her daughters slept in the loft above. Mary, who was 9, had stopped asking about breakfast 3 days ago. Little Sarah, only 5, still woke up hungry, but had learned not to cry about it. Evelyn considered that a victory, which told her everything about how far they'd fallen. The land her husband had died for stretched out beyond the window, 40 acres of stubborn earth that grew more rocks than crops. Thomas had believed in this place with the fervor of a convert, had worked himself into an early grave trying to prove the soil could sustain more than weeds and regret. 2 years buried, and Evelyn was still trying to make his faith pay dividends. She was failing. The tax notice sat beside her elbow, its corners curling in the dry air. $63 owed by month's end, or the county would auction the land to whoever showed up with cash. In a town like Salvation Bend, that meant Victor Lang would buy it for pennies and add it to his collection of other people's broken dreams. Evelyn had 22 days. She placed the coins in a small cloth pouch and tucked it into her dress pocket, then stood and moved to the stove. The fire had died overnight. She considered the half log remaining in the wood box, decided against it. They'd need that tonight when the temperature dropped. Instead, she reached for the shawl hanging by the door. "Mama?" Mary's voice came soft from the loft. The girl had her father's eyes, dark and serious, and too old for her years. "Go back to sleep, honey." "Where are you going?" "Just outside. I'll be back." She didn't wait for more questions. The door stuck in its frame. Everything in this house stuck or sagged or threatened to collapse. But she shouldered it open and stepped into the pre-dawn cold. The sky held that particular quality of darkness that came just before light, when the stars began to fade, but the sun hadn't committed to the day yet. Evelyn wrapped the shawl tighter and walked to the well, her boots crunching on frost-brittled grass. That's when she saw it. A loaf of bread, wrapped in brown paper, sitting on the porch rail. She stopped walking, stared at it like it might be a rattlesnake coiled up and waiting. Bread didn't just appear. Not out here, not on her porch, not when she hadn't bought any or baked any or begged any from the neighbors who'd stopped pretending to care. Evelyn looked around. The nearest homestead sat 2 miles east. The road into town cut north through the valley, empty and pale in the weak light. Nothing moved except the wind. She approached the bread slowly, half expecting it to vanish. It didn't. She picked it up, still warm, fresh enough that she could smell yeast and something sweeter. Honey, maybe. Her stomach cramped with want. Who would do this? Not the Harrisons, who'd made it clear they thought a widow with children had no business trying to work land alone. Not Pastor Carlisle, who'd offered to pray for her situation but not much else. Certainly not anyone from town, where charity came with conditions and every kindness carried interest. She stood there holding the bread as the sun finally broke over the eastern ridge, painting the valley floor in shades of copper and gold that made the drought look almost beautiful. Her pride said to leave it. Her daughters' hollow faces said something different. Evelyn took the bread inside. That morning, Mary and Sarah ate until their bellies stopped hurting, and Evelyn told herself it was a one-time thing. Someone's conscience, briefly activated. It wouldn't happen again. But the next morning, there was another loaf. Same brown paper, same warmth, same impossible timing that put it on her porch before she woke. And the morning after that, and the one after that. By the 5th day, Evelyn stopped sleeping. She sat by the window in the dark hours, watching, waiting to catch whoever thought they could purchase her gratitude with flour and yeast. But no one came. Or if they did, they moved like smoke. On the sixth morning, she'd had enough. She woke before the birds, dressed in the dark, and positioned herself on the porch with Thomas's old rifle across her knees. The gun wasn't loaded. She'd sold the ammunition 2 months back. But whoever was playing this game didn't need to know that. The cold settled into her bones. Her breath made clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang its lonely song, and the wind answered with its own. Then she heard footsteps, not on the road, coming across the open land from the south, steady and unhurried. Evelyn raised the rifle, finger on the trigger guard, and waited. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, lean, moving with the kind of economy that came from long miles and hard country. A man, she could tell that much, wearing a coat that had seen better years and a hat pulled low. He carried something wrapped in paper. He got within 30 feet before he saw her. He stopped. Didn't run, didn't speak, just stood there holding the bread like they'd both been caught doing something they shouldn't. "That's close enough," Evelyn said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The man didn't move. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind pulling at their clothes. "I don't want your charity," she continued. Still nothing. He might have been carved from stone. "Did you hear me? I don't need your pity or your not pity." His voice was rough, like it didn't get used much, low and careful. "Then what?" Evelyn kept the rifle pointed at his chest. "What do you call sneaking around in the dark, leaving food for people you don't know?" "Not sneaking, walking. At 4 in the morning. Better than noon." Something in his tone almost sounded like humor, but his face remained hidden under that hat brim. Evelyn felt her anger spike. "I don't have money to pay you back." "Didn't ask for payment." "Then why?" The question hung in the cold air. The man shifted his weight, and for a second she thought he might turn and leave. Instead, he took a step forward. "I said that's far enough." He stopped again. Then he did something unexpected. He crouched down and set the bread on the ground, stood back up, and looked directly at her. She still couldn't see his face clearly, but she felt the weight of his gaze. "Your daughters need to eat," he said. "That's why." Evelyn's hands tightened on the rifle. "You been watching my girls?" "Been watching the smoke from your chimney, or lack of it. Been watching how thin you've gotten walking to town. Been watching this place struggle. That's not your concern." "Maybe not." "Then leave us alone." The man considered this, then he shook his head. "Can't do that." "Why not?" "Because I know what happens next. You run out of time, run out of money, run out of everything. Lang takes this land and you end up—" He stopped himself. "End up what?" "Somewhere worse." Evelyn stood up, the rifle barrel dropping slightly. "You know Victor Lang?" The man's jaw tightened. She could see that much in the growing light. "Know of him." "He send you here?" "No." "Then who did?" "Nobody sends me anywhere." He said it flat, final. "I go where I choose." "And you chose my porch?" "Chose to help." "I don't need help." The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked past her at the cabin, the sagging roof, the boards that needed replacing, the window with oiled paper instead of glass. His gaze moved to the fields beyond, to the irrigation ditch Thomas had started and never finished, to the fence posts leaning like drunks. "All right," he said quietly. He turned to leave. Evelyn watched him take 3 steps before her mouth betrayed her. "Wait." He stopped but didn't turn around. She hated herself for the next words, but her daughters' faces pushed them out anyway. "The bread. Is it... will there be more?" His shoulders moved slightly. A shrug, maybe, or a breath. "If you want." "I didn't say I wanted it." "Then I'll stop." "I didn't say that either." Now he did turn. The sun had climbed higher, throwing light across his features. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young. Somewhere in that country where hard living added years that calendars didn't count. His face was weathered, angular, with eyes that held something she couldn't name. Sadness, maybe, or the kind of tired that sleep wouldn't fix. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jonah Hale." "I'm Evelyn Cross." "I know." "How?" "Town talks." "About me?" "About the widow trying to work land alone." About the daughters getting thinner, about the taxes coming due. He paused. About how nobody's helping. Evelyn felt heat rise in her chest. I don't want to be talked about. Then you shouldn't be worth talking about. Meaning what? Meaning you're doing something people think is impossible. That draws attention. She lowered the rifle completely. You think it's impossible? Jonah looked at the land again, at the endless sweep of drought-starved earth under a sky that hoarded rain like a miser. I think impossible is just a word people use when they're scared to try. Something in Evelyn's throat tightened. She swallowed it down. The bread, she said. That's all? Just bread? For now. And later? Whatever helps. I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. People don't do things for nothing, Mr. Hale. He met her eyes. Maybe I'm not people. Before she could respond, he touched his hat brim, a gesture that might have been goodbye or see you tomorrow or something else entirely, and walked back the way he'd come. Within minutes, the land had swallowed him, and Evelyn stood alone on her porch, holding an empty rifle and watching the place where he'd disappeared. She picked up the bread. Still warm. That night, after the girls had eaten and fallen asleep, Evelyn sat at the table counting her 11 cents again. The tax notice mocked her with its official language and impossible demands. $63. She made that in a year, maybe, if she sold every egg her 3 chickens produced and found work in town that didn't exist and performed miracles on a daily basis. She thought about Jonah Hale, about his rough voice and careful movements, about the way he'd looked at her land like he could see something in it beyond dirt and disappointment, about the way he'd said, I know what happens next, like he'd watched it happen before. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows and finding gaps in the walls. Evelyn pulled her shawl tighter and tried not to calculate how many more mornings they had before the cold became something they couldn't survive. The bread came again the next morning, and the one after. By the end of the second week, Evelyn stopped watching for him. The bread simply appeared, regular as sunrise, and she took it inside without questioning the mechanics of how or why. Mary noticed, of course. Children always noticed. Who brings the bread, Mama? A man from town. What man? Just a man, a neighbor. We don't have neighbors close enough to bring bread before breakfast. Evelyn looked at her daughter. Too smart, too observant, too much like Thomas. We do now. Sarah, less concerned with logistics, just ate her portion and asked for more. Evelyn gave it to her, watching the color return to her youngest daughter's cheeks and feeling the complicated weight of gratitude and resentment in equal measure. On the 15th day, Jonah knocked on her door at noon. Evelyn opened it to find him standing in full daylight for the first time, and the clarity of sun made him more real somehow. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd spent his life outside, under weather that didn't forgive. His coat was patched but clean. His boots were worn but cared for. Everything about him suggested someone who had little and maintained it well. Mrs. Cross. Mr. Hale. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure how to navigate this new dynamic. Your roof needs work, he said finally. Evelyn glanced up. I know. Bad work, the kind that'll collapse when the snow comes. I'll fix it. With what? The question wasn't cruel, just factual. Evelyn bristled anyway. I'll figure something out. Jonah studied the roofline, then looked back at her. I could do it. I told you I can't pay. I know, not asking for payment. Then why would you? Because it needs doing, and I can do it. He said it simple, like that settled the matter. I don't accept charity, Mr. Hale. Then call it something else. Like what? He thought about it. Neighboring. We're not neighbors. You don't live nearby. Live in town. Close enough. Evelyn crossed her arms. Where in town? I've never seen you before 3 weeks ago. The boarding house on Front Street, room at the end of the hall. How long have you been there? Month, give or take. Doing what? This and that, ranch work when it's available, odd jobs. For who? His expression shifted slightly, closing off. Different people. Victor Lang? The name landed like a stone in still water. Jonah's face went carefully neutral. No. You said you knew of him. A knowing of someone and working for them are different things. Are they? In this case, he held her gaze. I don't work for Lang. Haven't. Won't. Evelyn wanted to believe him. Needed to, maybe, which made her trust the feeling less. Why are you really here, Mr. Hale? Told you. The roof. No. Why are you here? At my home, bringing food, offering help. Men don't do that without wanting something. Jonah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something heavier than before. Maybe I'm trying to do something right for once. For once? For once. She waited for elaboration. None came. He just stood there, looking tired and determined and like he'd made up his mind about something a long time ago. The roof, Evelyn said finally. If you fix it, I'll make coffee. Deal. He worked for 3 days straight, starting at dawn and finishing at dusk. Evelyn watched from the window as he tore off rotted shingles and replaced them with new wood he'd brought from town. She didn't ask where he'd gotten the materials or what they'd cost. Some questions felt dangerous. Mary and Sarah watched too, fascinated by this stranger who moved around their roof like he belonged there. On the second day, Sarah brought him water without being asked, and he thanked her with the same serious courtesy he showed Evelyn. Mary remained suspicious but curious, orbiting closer each afternoon. What's his name? She asked her mother. Jonah Hale. Is he going to stay? He's fixing the roof, honey, then he'll go. But will he come back? Evelyn looked at her daughter's hopeful face and felt her heart crack slightly. I don't know. On the third day, when the work was finished, Jonah climbed down and stood in the yard studying his handiwork. Evelyn brought coffee like she'd promised, weak but hot. He took the cup and drank it black. Should hold through winter, she saw, he said. Thank you. He nodded. They stood there as the afternoon sun slanted gold across the valley, and Evelyn realized she'd grown accustomed to his presence. The silence around him didn't feel empty. It felt settled, like he was someone who'd made peace with quiet. The fence posts, he said after a while. They're leaning. I know. Could straighten them. Mr. Hale, and the irrigation ditch. Your husband started one, looks like. He did. Never finished? No. Her voice went tight. He died before he could. Jonah looked at her, then at the girls playing near the well. I could finish it. Why would you do that? Because water matters. Because this land might grow something if it had a chance. Because... He stopped, studied his coffee. Because I've got time, and you've got need. What do you get out of it? He smiled barely. Coffee, apparently. That's not enough. Maybe it is. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, fear or hope, or the dangerous space between them. People will talk. They already talk. It'll get worse. A man spending time at a widow's home. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. No, Jonah said quietly. It's not easy, but it's true anyway. She studied him, this stranger who'd walked into her life with bread and stubborn kindness. I don't understand you. Good. Good? Means I'm not simple. Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. No, you're not that. He finished his coffee, handed back the cup. I'll come by tomorrow, start on those posts. And if I say no, then I won't. Just like that? Just like that. Evelyn believed him, which surprised her. Tomorrow, then. He touched his hat again, that same gesture of goodbye that wasn't quite goodbye, and walked toward town. Evelyn watched until he disappeared, then went inside to find Mary staring at her with knowing eyes. He's coming back, the girl said, to fix the fence. And then? Then nothing. You like him. Mary, you do. I can tell. Evelyn felt heat in her face. That's enough. It's okay, Mama. I like him too. He's quiet, but he's nice. We barely know him. So, we didn't know Papa either when you first met him. The statement hit harder than her daughter intended. Evelyn had been 17 when she'd married Thomas Cross, had known him 6 weeks before saying yes to a life she couldn't have imagined. Love had come later, slow and steady and real, but it had started with a leap of faith into uncertainty. She wasn't 17 anymore. Couldn't afford leaps of any kind. "It's different," she told Mary. "How?" "It just is." But lying in bed that night, listening to the wind test Jonah's repair work on the roof, Evelyn wondered if her daughter might be right. Not about love. That was absurd, premature, impossible. But about the quiet man who'd shown up with bread and stayed for coffee and seemed determined to fix everything broken about her life without asking permission or expecting payment. What did he want? The question kept her awake long after exhaustion should have claimed her. The next morning, Jonah arrived at sunrise with fence posts and tools. He worked methodically, replacing the worst of the leaning posts and reinforcing the others. Evelyn brought him water at midday and found him stripped to his shirt sleeves despite the cold, muscles working under fabric as he set a post deep. "You'll freeze, ish," she said. "I'll warm up." She set the water down and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Mrs. Cross?" "Yes?" "The man who came by yesterday evening, who was he?" Evelyn went still. "What man?" "Rode past on a gray horse, slowed down when he saw me working." Her stomach dropped. "Did he say anything?" "No, just looked." Then kept riding toward town. "What did he look like?" "Older, well-dressed, the kind of man who wants you to know he's important." "Victor Lang. It had to be." "That's Victor Lang," Evelyn said. He owns most things around here, including the land office and the sheriff and anyone else worth owning." Jonah's jaw tightened. "He give you trouble?" "No more than anyone else with money gives people without it." "He want your land?" "He wants everyone's land. He makes offers. If you refuse, he waits until you're desperate, then makes worse offers." "You refused?" "Twice. He'll make a third offer soon." She paused. "Probably lower than the first two." Jonah drove the post deeper, his strikes harder than necessary. "What'll you do?" "What can I do? I owe taxes I can't pay. He knows it. Whole town knows it." "How much?" $63. The number sat between them like a boulder. "How much time you got?" 16 days. Jonah stopped working, leaned on the post. Sweat darkened his collar despite the cold. "That's not much." "No." "You got any prospects? Anything you can sell?" Evelyn laughed, a sound without humor. "I've got 3 chickens, a broken plow, and 40 acres of dirt that won't grow grain. What do you think?" He looked at her, then at the land spreading away in all directions. "I think there's more here than dirt." "Like what?" "Don't know yet, but something. Otherwise, Lang wouldn't circle like a buzzard." The observation settled into Evelyn's mind. She'd been so focused on survival, she hadn't stopped to wonder why Lang wanted this specific patch of nowhere. Her land wasn't better than others he could claim, wasn't positioned for trade routes or close to town, just 40 acres of struggling earth that her husband had chosen for reasons even he hadn't fully explained. "I need to get back," she said. "Girls will wonder where I am." Jonah nodded. As she walked away, he called after her. "Mrs. Cross?" She turned. "If Lang comes by again, don't be alone with him." "Why?" "Men like that get ideas when they think nobody's watching." Something cold moved through her. "You think he'd—" "I think 16 days makes people desperate. You and him both." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I'll be careful." "See that you are." That night, after the girls slept, Evelyn counted her money again. 11 cents. She'd been counting those same 3 coins for 2 weeks, and they hadn't multiplied or transformed into something useful. Tomorrow she'd go to town, try to find work that didn't exist, beg mercy from creditors who'd already shown their limits. 16 days. The wind rattled the new roof Jonah had built, and Evelyn closed her eyes and tried to imagine what came next if she failed. Where would they go? What would they do? How did 3 people survive with nothing in country that barely sustained those with everything? She fell asleep at the table, her head on folded arms, and dreamed of bread that turned to dust in her hands. Morning came too fast. Evelyn woke to Sarah tugging her sleeve. "Mama, there's more bread, and something else." Evelyn lifted her head, neck stiff from sleeping crooked. What else? Come see. On the porch, alongside the usual loaf, sat a small wooden box. Evelyn opened it to find eggs, a dozen of them, fresh and perfect. A folded note lay on top. For the girls, it read. Not charity, just surplus. Evelyn recognized Jonah's handwriting from the marks he'd made measuring fence posts. She held the note and felt her throat go tight. Can we cook them? Sarah asked, eyes bright. Yes, honey, we can cook them. They ate eggs that morning, scrambled in the pan with real butter that must have come from somewhere Evelyn didn't question. The girls laughed over breakfast, and Mary told a story about a bird she'd seen, and for 10 minutes the world felt almost normal. Then Evelyn went to town. Salvation Bend sat in a valley where the hills closed in like hands cupping water. It wasn't big. 2 streets, maybe 30 buildings, half of them belonging to Victor Lang in one way or another. The general store, the land office, the grain depot, the bank. Lang's empire built on other people's failures. Evelyn walked past the boarding house where Jonah lived, wondered which window was his, kept moving. She had business at the land office, though business might be too generous a word for begging. The clerk, a man named Simmons who'd gotten fat on a job that required nothing but saying no, looked up when she entered. Mrs. Cross? Mr. Simmons. If you're here about the taxes, I need an extension. Can't do it. I just need another month. I'm working on can't do it, he repeated. Rules are rules. Payments due by the 30th or the land goes to auction. But if I could just... No extensions, no exceptions. He said it without looking at her, like she was tiresome. You should consider Mr. Lang's offer. Still stands, far as I know. How much is he offering now? $40. Evelyn felt anger spike hot. That land is worth 10 times that. Land's worth what people will pay. Right now, that's $40. Take it or don't. And if I don't? Simmons finally looked at her. His eyes were small and mean. Then it goes to auction, and Mr. Lang buys it for whatever the tax debt is. You get nothing, and your girls end up... He shrugged. Well, you know where they end up. The threat wasn't subtle. Evelyn's hands curled into fists at her sides. You're a real Christian, Mr. Simmons. I'm a businessman. Big difference. She left before she said something that would make things worse, walked out into the cold afternoon with her heart hammering and her options dwindling. $40. 23 short of what she needed, and accepting it would mean losing everything anyway. She was halfway home when a horse fell into step beside her. Mrs. Cross? Victor Lang rode his gray gelding with the ease of someone who'd never questioned his right to be anywhere. He was maybe 50, well-fed, dressed in clothes that cost more than Evelyn's entire house. His face had the smooth quality of a man who'd never missed a meal or worried about next week. Mr. Lang, long walk from town. I could give you a ride. No, thank you. Suit yourself. He kept pace anyway, the horse's hooves clopping on the frozen road. Heard you visited Simmons. How'd that go? You heard fast. It's a small town. People talk. He smiled. Especially to me. Evelyn kept walking. Lang kept following. My offer still stands, he said. $40, cash. Today if you want it. I don't. You should reconsider. Time's running short. I'm aware. Are you? Lang leaned down slightly, his voice dropping to something almost confidential. Because I'm not sure you understand your position, Mrs. Cross. 16 days from now, that land becomes mine anyway. You get nothing, your daughters get nothing, and you end up, well, wherever women without prospects end up. Evelyn stopped walking, turned to face him. Is that a threat? It's a fact. I'm actually trying to help you. Help me. $40 is more than nothing. It could get you and your girls to Denver, maybe. Fresh start, new opportunities. This is my home. It's dirt and debt. That's all it is. Something in Evelyn snapped. You don't know what it is. Lang's smile thinned. I know exactly what it is. Worthless land that a dead man gambled on and lost. Now his widow's too proud to admit it. Get away from me, Mrs. Cross. I said get away. Lang straightened in his saddle, the smile gone entirely. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Not if it affects my business interests. How does my failure affect you? You'll get the land either way. Something shifted in Lang's expression. Calculation maybe, or irritation that she'd noticed the obvious. Just trying to be neighborly. You're not my neighbor, you're a vulture. The words hung in the cold air. Lang's horse shifted, sensing tension. When he spoke again, his voice carried a harder edge. I've been patient with you, Mrs. Cross. More patient than most would be. But patience has limits. He gathered his reins. 16 days. When they're up, we'll see how much that pride costs you. He rode off toward town, and Evelyn stood in the road watching him go, her whole body shaking. From cold or anger or fear, she couldn't tell. Maybe all three. She got home to find Jonah still working on the fence, the afternoon light slanting long across the valley. He looked up when she approached, read something in her face. What happened? Nothing. Don't look like nothing. Evelyn stopped at the fence line. Lang stopped me on the road. Jonah's whole body went still. He touch you? No, just talked. About what? His offer. How my time's running out. How I should take his money while I can. You tell him to go to hell? More or less. Jonah nodded slowly, then went back to work. But his movements were tighter now, controlled anger in every strike of the hammer. After a while, he spoke without looking at her. There's more to this than taxes. What do you mean? Lang doesn't care about this land for its own sake. He's after something specific. Like what? That's what we need to figure out. We? He did look at her then. Yeah, we. Evelyn felt something complicated move through her chest. Why do you care, Mr. Hale? He took a long time answering. When he did, his voice was quiet. Because I've seen what happens when men like Lang get what they want, and I'm tired of watching it happen. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. They stood there as the sun dropped toward the horizon, and Evelyn realized she'd reached a decision without meaning to. This man, this stranger who had appeared with bread and stayed for something neither of them had named, was tangled up in her fate now. For better or worse. All right, she said, we figure it out together. Jonah drove one last post, tested its stability, nodded. Tomorrow I'll ride to the county office, see what records they've got on this land. Looking for what? Whatever Lang knows that we don't. That night, Evelyn lay awake listening to the girls breathe in the loft above and thinking about the quiet man who'd somehow become part of their lives. She didn't know his full story, didn't know where he'd come from or what he'd done before Salvation Bend, didn't know if trusting him was wisdom or desperation. But 15 days remained, and desperation was all she had left. Jonah left before dawn, riding a borrowed horse toward the county seat 30 miles east. Evelyn watched from the window until he disappeared into the gray morning, then turned to face another day of impossible arithmetic. 15 days. $63.11. The girls were still asleep when she heard the knock. Not Jonah's careful tap, but something harder. Official. Evelyn's stomach tightened as she opened the door to find Sheriff Porter on her porch, his badge catching the early light. Mrs. Cross. Sheriff. Porter was a big man gone soft in the middle, the kind who'd traded muscle for comfort years ago. He worked for the county, which meant he worked for whoever paid the county's bills, which meant Victor Lang. Bit early for a visit, Evelyn said. Got a complaint filed yesterday. Thought I'd check on it before things get complicated. What kind of complaint? Neighbor reported seeing a stranger on your property. Man doing work, spending time here. Raised some concerns. Evelyn felt heat rise in her face. What neighbor? Nearest house is 2 miles off. Anonymous complaint. That's convenient. Porter shifted his weight, looked past her into the cabin. This man, he living here? No. But he's been around? He's been helping with repairs. That's not a crime. Depends on the arrangement. The implication hit like a slap. Evelyn's hands curled into fists. Say what you mean, Sheriff. Just saying how it looks. Widow woman, stranger man, spending time alone together. People talk. Let them talk. Mrs. Cross, I'm trying to help you here. Are you? Or are you delivering a message from whoever paid for that anonymous complaint? Porter's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate accusations. And I don't appreciate being told how to run my own home. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Porter stepped back. Just keep things proper, he said. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings affecting your situation with the county. He left before she could respond, and Evelyn stood in the doorway watching him right away, her whole body shaking. The message was clear enough. Lang was applying pressure from every direction, making sure she understood how alone she was. Mary appeared at her elbow. Mama, who was that? Nobody important? He looked important. Looks can lie. Evelyn pulled her daughter inside and closed the door, but the damage was done. Now the whole town would know the sheriff had visited, would speculate about why, would add it to the growing list of reasons Evelyn Cross was failing at everything that mattered. She fed the girls the last of Jonah's eggs and tried not to think about what came next. Jonah returned near sunset, his horse lathered and tired. Evelyn met him in the yard as he dismounted. Did you find anything? He handed her a rolled paper. Found this. Evelyn unrolled it, a survey map from 15 years back showing property lines and geological notes. Most of it meant nothing to her, just technical language about soil composition and drainage patterns. But one notation caught her eye, circled in Jonah's pencil. Possible aquifer. Requires further survey. What does this mean? She asked. Means there might be water under your land. Not just well water, real water, the kind that doesn't run dry in drought years. Evelyn looked at the map, then at her 40 acres stretching brown and barren. Thomas never mentioned this. He probably didn't know. This survey was done before the land was opened for homesteading. County buried it in old files, never followed up. Why not? Because following up costs money, and most of these surveys turned out wrong. But sometimes, he paused, sometimes they were right. And you think Lang knows about this? I think he knows something. Otherwise, why would he want your specific plot? There's easier land to claim. Evelyn felt something shift in her understanding. All this time, she'd thought Lang was just opportunistic, collecting property because that's what men like him did. But if he knew about water, real dependable water in a valley where drought killed as surely as bullets, then her land wasn't just dirt, it was currency. How do we prove it? She asked. We dig. Where? Jonah studied the map, compared it to the landscape. Survey mentions a depression near the eastern boundary, natural collection point. If there's water below, it'd be there. That's half a mile from the house. I know. Through rocky ground. I know that too. Evelyn looked at him, this man who kept solving problems she hadn't asked him to solve. Why are you doing this? Told you. I'm tired of watching people lose. That's still not a real answer. Jonah folded the map, handed it back. Maybe not. But it's true anyway. They started digging the next morning. Jonah brought tools from town, a pickaxe, shovels, iron bars for breaking rock. Evelyn left the girls with instructions to stay inside and walked with him to the eastern edge of her property where the land dipped slightly, forming a shallow bowl that collected rain when rain bothered to fall. Here, Jonah said, marking a spot with his boot. They worked in silence, taking turns with the pickaxe when the ground turned stubborn. The soil gave way to clay, then to rock that rang like iron when struck. Evelyn's hands blistered, her back screamed, but she kept swinging, kept digging, because if water was down there, it changed everything. By noon, they'd gone 3 feet deep and hit nothing but more rock. Maybe the survey was wrong, Evelyn said, wiping sweat despite the cold. Maybe. Or maybe we're digging in the wrong spot. Maybe that too. But Jonah kept working, methodical and patient, and Evelyn found herself matching his rhythm, swing, strike, dig, swing, strike, dig. The hole grew deeper, the pile of excavated earth higher. At 4 feet, they hit mud. Jonah stopped, crouched down, examined it. This isn't surface drainage. How can you tell? Too far down, and it's cold, real cold. He looked up at her. We're close. They dug faster, careless of blisters and aching muscles. At 5 feet, water began seeping into the hole, At 6, it was pooling faster than they could bail it out. That's it, Jonah said, breathing hard. That's the aquifer. Evelyn stared at the muddy water collecting in the bottom of their hole and felt something like hope crack through her chest. This is really here, under my land. Under your land, Jonah confirmed. And if it's here, it probably runs through the whole eastern section, maybe farther. How much water are we talking about? Won't know without a proper survey. But enough to matter, enough to irrigate, maybe water cattle, keep crops alive through drought. He climbed out of the hole, stood beside her. Enough to make this land worth real money. Evelyn's mind raced. If they could prove this, document it, get official confirmation before the auction. Lang can't know, she said suddenly. He might already. Then we need to move faster than him. How? You've got 2 weeks and no money for a proper survey. She looked at Jonah. But you know people at the county office. You got this map. Can you get a surveyor out here? Not officially, not without paperwork and fees you can't afford. Then unofficially. Jonah studied her face. That's a risk. Everything's a risk now. He nodded slowly. I know someone. Owes me a favor. Might be willing to come take a look, give an opinion. When? I'll ride out tonight. See if I can bring him back tomorrow. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Even if he confirms water, that doesn't solve your tax problem. Evelyn knew he was right, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like they were moving forward instead of just drowning slowly. One problem at a time. They filled the hole partially, enough to hide what they'd found, but not so much they'd have to dig it all again. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and Evelyn's whole body felt like it had been worked over with hammers. You should soak those hands, Jonah said, nodding at her blistered palms. I'll be fine. You won't be any good tomorrow if you can't hold a shovel. Worried about me, Mr. Hale? Something passed through his expression, too quick to name. Someone needs to be. He left for town as darkness fell, and Evelyn walked back to the cabin feeling the weight of the day in every step. The girls were already asleep, curled together in the loft. She heated water, soaked her hands, and tried not to think about all the ways this could still fall apart. But hope was a dangerous thing once it got loose. The next morning brought frost thick enough to ride in and no sign of Jonah. Evelyn fed the girls, did her chores, watched the road. By noon, worry had carved a hollow in her chest. Then she saw the riders, 3 of them coming from town. Jonah in front on the borrowed horse, and 2 others she didn't recognize. They dismounted in her yard, and Jonah made introductions. Mrs. Cross, this is William Fletcher. He's a surveyor out of Cheyenne. Fletcher was maybe 60, weathered and competent looking, with the careful eyes of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading land. He tipped his hat. Ma'am. And this is Samuel Torres, Jonah continued. He works the SA office. Torres was younger, nervous, his gaze darting around like he expected trouble. Mrs. Cross. Evelyn looked at Jonah. Both of them? Fletcher can confirm the water. Torres can document it officially, file the report before Lang knows what's happening. And they're willing to do this? Fletcher owes me, Jonah said. Torres owes Fletcher. It wasn't much of a chain of trust, but it was what they had. Evelyn nodded. The site's this way. They walked to the eastern boundary, and Evelyn felt her heart hammering as Fletcher examined their partially refilled hole. He was quiet for a long time, using instruments she didn't understand, taking measurements, making notes in a leather journal. Finally, he looked up. You've got water. How much? Can't say for certain without a full survey, but based on seepage rate and soil composition, I'd estimate significant flow. Enough to classify this as a primary water source. Torres wrote furiously, That changes the land valuation considerably. By how much? Evelyn asked. Fletcher considered. Hard to say. Water rights in this territory are complicated, but if you can prove prior claim and get it registered before anyone contests it. He paused. Could be worth several $1,000s, maybe more. The number hit Evelyn like a physical thing, thousands. Enough to pay taxes, repair the house, buy seed, hire help. Enough to not just survive, but actually live. How long to document it? Jonah asked. I can file a preliminary report today, Torres said. But full registration takes time, couple weeks minimum. She doesn't have weeks. Then I'll do what I can. They spent the next hour taking measurements, collecting water samples, photographing the site with equipment Torres had brought. Evelyn watched it all, feeling like she was standing outside her own life, watching it change in ways she couldn't quite believe. When they finished, Fletcher pulled her aside. This stays quiet, he said. You file that water claim, people will notice, Lang especially. I understand. Do you? Because men like him don't accept losses well. And this, he gestured at the land, this is a big loss. I'll be careful. Fletcher didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Jonah's a good man. Stubborn, but good. Listen to him. They rode out after that, Torres promising to file paperwork that afternoon, Fletcher saying he'd submit his official findings by week's end. Evelyn stood with Jonah in the empty yard, trying to process what had just happened. This might actually work, she said. Might. You don't sound convinced. I'm convinced the water's real. Less convinced Lang will accept it gracefully. What can he do? If Torres files the claim, if Fletcher's report is official, he can contest it, claim prior knowledge, prior rights, anything that delays registration until after your auction date. Jonah looked at her, and if he can't win legally, he'll find other ways. You mean? I mean men like Lang don't play fair when they're losing. The word settled cold in Evelyn's stomach. She'd been so focused on finding the water, proving its existence, she hadn't thought past that to what came next, to how Lang would react when his careful plans fell apart. So what do? We move fast, get that claim registered, pay your taxes before he can block it, and we watch our backs. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to every sound, wind, settling boards, distant coyotes. Part of her waited for trouble, for Lang or his men to show up and make good on Fletcher's warning. But trouble didn't come that night. It came 2 days later, in the form of fire. Evelyn woke to Sarah's screaming and the smell of smoke. She bolted from bed, grabbed both girls, and ran outside to find the woodshed burning bright against the pre-dawn darkness. Flames climbed the walls, consumed the roof, turned her winter fuel supply into ash and smoke. Stay here, she told the girls, then ran for the well. She hauled water until her arms gave out, threw bucket after bucket at flames that barely noticed. The shed was beyond saving, but she kept trying anyway, kept fighting until Jonah appeared out of the darkness and pulled her back. It's gone, he said. That's our firewood. Our only... I know, but you can't save it. They stood together watching it burn, and Evelyn felt the last of her hope crumble. The shed, the wood, the supplies they needed to survive winter, all of it turning to smoke while she stood helpless. When the sun came up, Jonah examined the remains. This wasn't an accident, he said, pointing to scorch marks that started at ground level, away from any natural ignition source. You're sure? I'm sure. His voice was flat, angry. Someone set this deliberately. Lang, can't prove it, but yeah, probably. Evelyn looked at the charred ruins, at her daughters huddled on the porch, at the impossible distance between where she stood and where she needed to be. 11 days remained, her wood was gone, and now Lang knew they'd found something worth burning for. He's trying to scare me off, she said. Is it working? She turned to face Jonah. No. Good. He touched her shoulder briefly. I'll ride to town, file a report with the sheriff. Porter won't do anything. Probably not, but it creates a record, shows pattern if things escalate. If they escalate? When, Jonah corrected quietly, when they escalate. He left after that, and Evelyn spent the morning sifting through ashes, salvaging what little hadn't burned completely. The girls helped, silent and scared, and Evelyn hated that they had to see this, had to learn so young how cruel the world could be. By afternoon, neighbors started arriving. Not to help, to warn. Mrs. Harrison came first, her face pinched with disapproval. Heard about your fire. News travels fast. It does when it's that kind of fire. Mrs. Harrison's meaning was clear. People are saying you've been making trouble. refusing reasonable offers, bringing in outsiders, stirring things up. I've been trying to save my home. Is that what you call it? The older woman's gaze swept the burned shed, the struggling land. Because it looks like you're just making everything harder for everyone. How is my situation affecting you, Mrs. Harrison? It affects all of us when someone won't accept reality. Lang's made you a fair offer. Take it and move on before someone gets hurt. Is that a threat? It's advice from someone who's lived here longer than you. She left after that, and Evelyn stood in the yard feeling the weight of isolation press down. The town had chosen sides, and she wasn't on the winning one. More visitors came over the next 2 days. The store owner, saying he couldn't extend any more credit. The minister, suggesting she pray about her stubbornness. The banker, explaining how her situation was making people nervous about lending in general. Every conversation carried the same message. Give up, accept defeat, stop fighting. Evelyn refused them all. On the 8th day before the auction, Torres sent word. The water claim was filed, but Lang had already submitted a counterclaim, asserting historical usage rights that predated Evelyn's ownership. The matter would go to arbitration, which could take months. Can he do that? Evelyn asked Jonah when he brought the news. He already did. But it's my land. The water's on my property. Doesn't matter if he can prove prior use, or even if he can just delay the decision long enough. Evelyn felt the trap closing. So we found the water for nothing. Not nothing. We proved it exists. That's worth something. Worth what? I still can't pay the taxes. The claim's tied up in legal battles I can't afford to fight. And Lang's getting more aggressive. She gestured at the burned shed. What's next? The house? The girls? Jonah's face went hard. He won't touch your girls. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll kill him if he tries. The words hung in the air, flat and final. Evelyn looked at this quiet man who'd walked into her life with bread and realized she didn't know him at all, didn't know what he'd done before, what he was capable of, what violence lived in his careful hands. Who are you? She asked. Really? Jonah looked away. Nobody important. That's not true. It's true enough. Jonah, I worked for men like Lang once, he said suddenly. Helped them acquire land, convince people to sell, convince them it was their idea, convince them they didn't have any other choice. His voice was low, rough. I was good at it, too good. Evelyn went still. You worked for Lang specifically? No, but men like him, back in Colorado before I came here. And now? Now I'm trying to do something different. Why? He finally looked at her, because I saw what happened to the people who listened to me, saw where they ended up after we took their land, and I couldn't. He stopped. I just couldn't anymore. Evelyn understood then. The bread, the repairs, the stubborn refusal to let her fail. Jonah wasn't just helping her. He was trying to balance scales that could never be balanced, trying to save one widow to make up for all the others he'd helped destroy. I'm not your redemption, she said quietly. I know. But I still need your help. I know that too. They stood in the cold afternoon, two people carrying too much history and not enough hope, and Evelyn made a decision. Then help me fight, not just survive. Fight. How? I don't know yet, but Lang wants this land, and he's willing to burn and threaten and lie to get it. That means it's worth more than $63 in taxes. It's worth whatever he thinks he'll gain by taking it. Jonah nodded slowly. You're talking about going after him directly. I'm talking about not lying down and dying quietly. That's dangerous. Living is dangerous. At least this way I choose how. Something shifted in Jonah's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. All right, then we need to figure out what he's really after. The water is part of it, but there's more, has to be. Water's valuable, but this feels bigger. They spent that evening going through every paper Thomas had left. Deeds, surveys, notes. Most of it was routine, but one document caught Jonah's attention. A geological survey from the railroad company, done 20 years back when they were planning routes through the territory. Your land's marked here, Jonah said, pointing, with a notation about mineral deposits. What kind? Doesn't say. Just notes possible commercial value pending further analysis. Evelyn leaned closer. You think there's more than water? I think we need to find out. The next morning, Jonah rode to the mining office in the county seat while Evelyn stayed behind with the girls. She spent the day watching the road, jumping at shadows, feeling the weight of 6 days pressing down. He returned after dark, his face grim. There's silver, he said without preamble. Small deposits scattered through this valley. Not enough to justify major operations, but enough to matter. And your land, he paused. Your land sits on what the old surveys thought might be a primary vein. Thought? They never confirmed it. Company went bankrupt before they could do full testing, but Lang's been buying up properties in this area for 3 years. Not random, following the old survey lines. Evelyn felt everything click into place. The water was valuable, but silver was wealth. Real, lasting wealth. The kind that built empires. He knows, she said. He knows. And if he gets my land, he controls the whole valley. Probably. Evelyn walked to the window, looked out at darkness broken only by starlight. How do we prove it? We can't. Not in 6 days. Testing takes time, equipment, experts. Then what do we do? Jonah came to stand beside her. We make him think we can prove it. Make him nervous enough to make a mistake. How? We let it slip that we've got surveyors coming, that we're filing mineral claims, that we know what he's after. He'll just move faster to take the land. Maybe. Or maybe he'll offer real money to buy it outright, enough to pay your taxes and have something left. Evelyn considered it. That's a gamble. Everything is now. She looked at him. This man who'd become her partner in ways she hadn't planned, who carried his own ghosts and fought them by fighting for her. If this goes wrong, it might. The girls, I'll make sure they're safe, whatever happens. You can't promise that either. Watch me. The certainty in his voice steadied something in her chest. Evelyn nodded. All right, we make him think we know everything. See how he reacts. They started the next morning. Jonah made sure to be seen in town talking to the assay office, asking loud questions about mineral rights and claim filing procedures. He let slip at the general store that Mrs. Cross had surveyors coming, that big things were happening out at her place. The rumors spread like fire in dry grass. By afternoon, Lang sent word requesting a meeting. Evelyn received him on her porch, Jonah standing visible in the yard. Lang rode up alone, but his eyes kept moving, calculating. Mrs. Cross. Mr. Lang, I hear you've been busy. Just trying to understand what I own. And what do you think you own? More than dirt, apparently. Lang smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm prepared to make a new offer, $50. Still not enough to pay the taxes. $65 then. The number landed like a stone, $2 more than she owed. Enough to save the land and have pocket change left over. That's generous, Evelyn said carefully. I can be reasonable when people are reasonable with me. And if I'm not? The smile vanished. Then you lose everything in 5 days and I buy the land at auction for whatever the tax debt is. You get nothing and whatever's under your land becomes mine anyway. Unless I file mineral claims first. Lang's expression hardened. Claims take time to process. You don't have time. Maybe not. But you don't have mineral rights if I file first. Could tie things up for years. They stared at each other, and Evelyn saw calculation in Lang's eyes, saw him weighing options and finding them all unpleasant. $75, he said finally. Final offer. It was more money than Evelyn had ever seen in one place. Enough to pay taxes, buy supplies, get the girls through winter with food and warmth. Enough to start over somewhere else if she wanted. Enough to give up everything Thomas had died for. I'll think about it, she said. Lang's jaw tightened. You have until tomorrow. After that, the offer expires and we do this the hard way. He rode off, and Evelyn felt her hands shaking. Jonah came up onto the porch. That was brave. That was stupid. $75 is not enough, not for what's really here. We don't know what's really here. It's all guessing and old surveys. But Lang doesn't know we're guessing, and he just showed his hand. He's scared. Evelyn looked at where Lang had disappeared down the road. Scared men are dangerous men. Yeah, Jonah agreed quietly. They are. That night, Evelyn couldn't eat. She sat at the table while the girls slept and stared at the tax notice that had started all of this. 5 days. $75 on the table. The safe choice, the smart choice. The choice that meant losing anyway. Because even if she took the money, even if she paid the taxes and kept the land, Lang would find another way. Men like him always did. The water claim was already contested. Any mineral claims would face the same battles. She'd win one fight and lose the war. Unless she changed the game entirely. Near midnight, she heard a noise outside. Not the usual wind or animals, but something deliberate. Footsteps on the porch. Evelyn grabbed the unloaded rifle and moved to the door. Through the gap, she saw a figure, not Jonah, someone smaller, moving quick. They left something on the porch rail and hurried away. She waited until they were gone, then opened the door. Another note, this one unsigned. They're coming for you tomorrow night. After dark, take the money and run. Evelyn stood in the cold reading those words over and over and felt the last of her illusions burn away. Lang wasn't going to wait for the auction. He was done playing by any rules. She walked out to the barn where Jonah had been sleeping since the shed burned. He woke as she approached, hand moving to the gun at his side before he recognized her. What's wrong? She handed him the note. He read it in the moonlight, his face going hard. Who delivered this? I don't know. Someone small, quick, gone before I could see. Someone trying to help. Or someone trying to scare me into taking Lang's offer. Jonah looked at her. What do you want to do? Evelyn thought about her daughters sleeping in the loft, about Thomas buried on the hill, about all the people who told her to give up, to accept reality, to understand her place. I want to fight, she said. Could get us killed. Could. But I'm tired of being scared. Jonah folded the note, handed it back. Then we fight, but we do it smart. They spent the rest of the night planning, and when the sun rose on the 4th day before the auction, Evelyn Cross was no longer running. She was hunting. The plan was simple in the way dangerous things often were. Jonah would ride to the territorial capital at first light, carrying every document they had. The water survey, the mineral notes, the old railroad maps. He'd file claims with the federal land office, bypass the county entirely, create a paper trail Lang couldn't corrupt with local officials in his pocket. Meanwhile, Evelyn would take the girls to the Harrisons. She hated asking that particular favor. But the Harrisons had 6 sons and a defensible house. If Lang's men came looking for trouble, they'd find more than one widow with an empty rifle. You're sure about this? No, Jonah asked as he saddled the horse in pre-dawn darkness. No, but I'm doing it anyway. He checked the cinch, checked it again. His movements were tight, controlled. If something goes wrong, then you do what you have to do. Get those papers filed. Make it legal. I'm talking about you. Evelyn looked at him in the weak light spilling from the barn. I'll be fine. You don't know that. Neither do you, but we're out of choices. Jonah pulled the saddle strap hard, leather creaking. I should stay. Let someone else ride to the capital. Who? Torres is already risking his job helping us. Fletcher's gone back to Cheyenne. There's nobody else. Then we wait. Find another way. We have 4 days, Jonah. 4 days before they auction this land and all of this becomes pointless. She stepped closer. You said you'd help me fight. This is fighting. He met her eyes, and something passed between them that neither named. Finally, he nodded. Keep the rifle close. Even if it's not loaded, make them think it is. I will. And if anyone you don't know comes to the house, I'll be gone. I'm taking the girls at dawn. Good. He mounted up, the horse shifting beneath him. I'll be back in 3 days. 2 if I push hard. That only gives us a day before it's... I know, but it's what we have. He rode out as the sun broke over the ridge, and Evelyn watched until he disappeared before turning back to the cabin. The girls were awake, watching from the window. Where's Mr. Hale going? Mary asked. On an errand. We're going on one too. Where? The Harrisons. Just for a day or 2.
Sarah's face brightened. Can we play with their boys? Maybe.
We'll see. She packed what little they needed, extra clothes, the last of the bread, Thomas's pocket watch that Mary treasured. The rifle went in last, wrapped in a blanket so the girls wouldn't ask questions. By the time the sun cleared the hills, they were walking east toward the Harrison place. The 2 miles felt longer than usual. Every sound made Evelyn's shoulders tense. Every shadow could hide men with bad intentions. But the road stayed empty, and they reached the Harrisons without incident. Mrs. Harrison opened the door looking surprised and not particularly pleased. Mrs. Cross, I need a favor. Do you now? Evelyn pushed past her pride. I need somewhere safe for my girls to stay, just a day or two. Mrs. Harrison's expression hardened. This about that trouble you've been courting? This is about keeping my daughters safe while I handle some business. What kind of business needs children sent away? The kind that's none of yours. Will you help or not? They stared at each other, and Evelyn watched the older woman calculate. Finally, Mrs. Harrison sighed. I don't approve of what you're doing, making trouble, refusing good sense, dragging that stranger into your affairs. I didn't ask for approval. I asked for help. 2 days, that's all. And if there's any indication this trouble's coming here, they leave. Fair enough. Evelyn crouched down in front of Mary and Sarah. You be good. Listen to Mrs. Harrison. I'll be back soon. Promise? Sarah asked, her small face worried. Promise. Mary studied her with those 2 old eyes. You're going to fight, aren't you? I'm going to finish what we started. Be careful, Mama. I will, honey. The walk back alone felt different. Lighter in some ways, heavier in others. Evelyn kept her hand on the rifle through the blanket and tried not to think about all the ways this could collapse. She reached home near noon to find a rider waiting in her yard. Not Lang, not his men. A woman, maybe 30, sitting side saddle on a paint mare. She wore traveling clothes, dusty but well made, and her face held the kind of wariness that came from learning the world wasn't safe. Mrs. Cross? Who's asking? The woman dismounted. My name's Catherine Wells. I heard you're having trouble with Victor Lang. Evelyn's grip tightened on the rifle. How'd you hear that? Word travels, especially about Lang. Catherine pulled an envelope from her saddlebag. I have information you need. What kind of information? The kind that might keep you alive. They went inside and Evelyn made coffee while Catherine spread papers across the table. Documents, maps, official-looking certificates with seals and signatures. Lang's done this before, Catherine said. 5 times in 3 years. Targets properties along the old mineral survey lines. Applies pressure until people sell or lose their land to tax seizure, then claims everything. Water rights, mineral rights, the whole parcel. How do you know this? Catherine's jaw tightened. Because he did it to my family. My father owned land 20 miles north. Good land with water. Lang wanted it, made offers. My father refused. Then accidents started happening. Barn fires, poisoned wells. My mother got run off the road by men nobody could identify. What happened? My father sold. Took Lang's money and moved us to Denver. Died 6 months later. I think from the shame of it. Vit Simal Masat. Evelyn felt her chest go tight. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Catherine tapped the papers. I've been collecting evidence, talking to other families Lang squeezed out, building a case. For what? The law's in his pocket. County law, sure, but federal land fraud is different. If we can prove a pattern, show he's been manipulating claims and falsifying documents, the territorial governor has to act. We don't have time for federal investigations. No. But we have enough to make him nervous. Maybe enough to make him back off. Evelyn studied the documents. Names, dates, properties. A map showing Lang's acquisitions forming a pattern across the valley, all along that old railroad survey line Jonah had found. Why are you helping me? She asked. Catherine looked up. Because you're fighting back. Nobody else has. Everyone just took the money and ran. Maybe they were smarter than me. Maybe. Or maybe you're the first person stubborn enough to actually win. They spent the afternoon going through everything. Catherine's evidence filled gaps in Evelyn's understanding, showed the full scope of Lang's operation. Water, silver, control of the valley's future growth. He wasn't just a land grabber, he was building an empire on other people's graves. There's more, Catherine said as evening approached. Lang's got financial problems. He's overextended, borrowed heavy to fund all these acquisitions. If even one of his claims falls through, if he loses a key property, the whole thing could collapse. Exactly. Your land's not just valuable, it's critical to his entire plan. Evelyn felt something shift in her understanding. So if I hold out, if I make this cost him too much, he could lose everything, and he knows it, which makes him more dangerous. Much more. Catherine's expression went serious. That note you got, the warning, that wasn't empty? Lang's done worse than barn fires when he's desperate. Like what? Catherine didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. Like making people disappear. The words hung in the darkening cabin. Evelyn thought about her daughters safe at the Harrisons, about Jonah riding hard toward the capital, about herself sitting alone in a house that felt suddenly too isolated. So what do I do? You don't face him alone. When he comes, and he will come, you make sure there are witnesses, people who can testify, documentation that survives even if you don't. You're talking like I might not. Catherine met her eyes. I'm talking like we need to be realistic about what we're up against. They made plans as night fell. Catherine would ride to the county seat at first light, file copies of her evidence with officials who might actually care, or at least officials Lang didn't own completely. She'd make noise, attract attention, create problems that would distract Lang's focus. Meanwhile, Evelyn would hold the property, make her presence obvious, make any move against her visible to anyone watching. You need backup, Catherine said. Someone here with you. Jonah's gone. Won't be back for days. Then find someone else. A neighbor, a ranch hand, anyone who can stand witness. Nobody in this town's going to stand with me against Lang. You'd be surprised. People are scared, but they're also tired. Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to make others remember they can too. After Catherine left, Evelyn sat alone in the dark cabin and tried to believe that. Tried to imagine she was more than just one exhausted widow with empty pockets and borrowed courage. The knock came near midnight. Evelyn jerked awake. She'd dozed off at the table, head on her arms. The rifle was across her knees. She stood quietly, moved to the window. A figure on the porch. Small, quick-moving. The same build as whoever'd left the warning note. Evelyn opened the door a crack. Who's there? It's me. A boy's voice, young. Billy Simmons, the land office clerk's son. Evelyn opened the door wider. Billy was maybe 14, skinny and nervous-looking in the moonlight. What are you doing here? My father. He's drinking at Lang's place, talking loud. I heard him say... The boy stopped, swallowed. He said they're coming tomorrow. Not tomorrow night like the note said. Tomorrow afternoon. Mr. Lang wants it done in daylight so people see, so everyone knows what happens when you don't take his offers. Evelyn's blood went cold. How many men? 6, maybe more. They're talking about forcing you off, burning what's left, making sure you can't come back. Your father knows this? He's helping plan it. Billy's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I know he's my pa, but this isn't right. None of it's right. Evelyn looked at this boy who'd risked his father's anger to warn her. Thank you, Billy. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but you need to get home before anyone notices you're gone. He nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, trying to think through panic. Afternoon. They were coming in daylight, maybe 8 hours from now. She couldn't fight 6 men alone. Couldn't even bluff it convincingly. The rifle had no ammunition, and even if it did, she didn't know if she could actually shoot someone. But Catherine was right about one thing. If this happened in daylight, with the whole valley watching, maybe that changed the equation. Maybe visibility was a weapon too. Evelyn spent the rest of the night preparing. She dragged the table outside, set it in the middle of the yard where anyone approaching would see it clearly. On it, she placed every document she had, copies Catherine had left, the old surveys, the tax notices, everything that proved her claim to this land. Then she sat down behind the table with the rifle visible across her lap and waited for sunrise. Dawn came cold and clear. By mid-morning, word had spread. Evelyn saw riders on distant hills, people watching from far enough to be safe, but close enough to see what happened, the valley holding its breath. Lang arrived at noon with 8 men. They rode in formation, Lang in the center looking calm and confident. Sheriff Porter was with him, which made this whole thing legal in the ways that mattered to people who believed law and justice were the same thing. Lang dismounted 20 feet from Evelyn's table. The others stayed horsed, hands near weapons. Mrs. Cross, Mr. Lang, I believe we had an agreement. My final offer expired at dawn. I didn't accept your offer. No, you didn't. Lang looked at the table, at the document spread across it. What's all this? Evidence, surveys, proof of water rights and mineral deposits. Copies have been filed with the Territorial Land Office. More copies are with the Federal Marshal. If anything happens to me, they go public. No. It was half bluff. Jonah wouldn't reach the capital until tonight at earliest, but Lang didn't know that. His expression flickered. You're wasting everyone's time. Am I? Because it seems like you're the one who rode out here with 8 armed men to deal with one widow. I'm here to collect what's owed. You've failed to pay your taxes. This property is subject to seizure. The auction isn't for 3 more days. The auction is a formality. The county has the right to take possession early if the owner is deemed uncooperative. Deemed by who? You? Lang's smile was cold. By the sheriff, acting on behalf of the county. Porter shifted in his saddle, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Cross, I'm going to have to ask you to vacate the property. This is my home. This is county property as of now. You're trespassing. That's not legal and you know it. It's legal if I say it is. Porter touched his gun belt. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Evelyn stood up slowly. The rifle stayed across her arms, pointed at nothing but impossible to ignore. You're going to shoot me, Sheriff, in front of all these witnesses? She gestured at the hills where watchers sat their horses. Maybe a dozen people, maybe more. Far enough to be safe, but close enough to testify. Porter hesitated. Lang didn't. Nobody's shooting anyone. We're simply executing a legal eviction. You can leave peacefully or be removed. Your choice. I choose to stay. That's not an option. Then you'll have to drag me off. In daylight. In front of the whole valley. Make sure everyone sees what happens when Victor Lang wants something. Lang's jaw tightened. You think witnesses matter? You think anyone's going to stand up for you? I think you're scared. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here with 8 men doing something you could have done legally in 3 days. I'm not scared of you. Then why are you sweating? It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but Lang's forehead showed moisture despite the cold, and Evelyn saw she'd hit something true. He was scared. Not of her, but of losing, of his whole carefully built scheme coming apart because one stubborn woman wouldn't break. Last chance, Lang said quietly. Walk away now. I'll give you $50. Enough for your girls, enough to start over somewhere else. No, then you get nothing. I get to watch you fail. Lang's expression went flat. He nodded to his men. 2 of them dismounted and started toward her. Evelyn raised the rifle. I said, stay back. They kept coming. She pulled the trigger. The click of the hammer on an empty chamber sounded loud in the cold air. The men stopped, looked at each other, started laughing. Gun's not even loaded, one of them said. Evelyn's stomach dropped, but she kept the rifle up. You sure about that? Want to test it? The men hesitated. Lang swore. Take the damn gun away from her. They moved again, faster now. Evelyn backed toward the cabin, still pointing the useless rifle, her mind racing for options that didn't exist. Then shots rang out. Not from a rifle, from the hills. Everyone froze. 3 more shots followed, kicking up dirt between Lang's men and Evelyn. Warning shots, deliberately missing. A rider appeared on the western ridge. Then another. Then 5 more. Catherine Wells led them, sitting her paint mare like she'd been born to it. Behind her rode men and women Evelyn recognized. Families Lang had pushed out, people who'd taken his money and left but apparently hadn't forgotten. They rode down into the valley, rifles visible, and formed a loose line between Evelyn and Lang's men. Catherine spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Federal marshals been notified of illegal seizure attempt. Witnesses are standing by. You touch her? You touch this property before the legal auction date, and you're looking at federal charges. This is county business, Lang said, but his voice had lost its certainty. It stopped being county business when you started forging water rights and falsifying mineral claims. Catherine pulled out documents. I've got testimony from 5 families. Dates, payments, threats, all of it documented and filed with the territorial governor as of 3 hours ago. That's a lie. Is it? Want to test that? Lang looked at the riders, at the witnesses on the hills, at Evelyn standing behind her table with her empty rifle. The math was changing, and they both knew it. This isn't over, Sid, he said. No, Catherine agreed. It's just starting, but you don't get to do it in the dark anymore. Lang remounted his horse. His men followed suit. Porter looked relieved to be leaving. 3 days, Lang said to Evelyn. Auction happens in 3 days. You still won't have the money.
Maybe not, but everyone will know why. He rode off, his men trailing behind, and Evelyn felt her legs go weak. She sat down hard, the rifle clattering onto the table. Catherine dismounted and walked over. You all right? I can't believe you came. Told you. Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up. The other riders approached slowly. Evelyn recognized them now. The Thorntons who'd lost their ranch 2 years back. The Mendez family who'd sold out and moved to Denver. Others whose names she'd heard but never met. An older man spoke first. We heard what you were doing. Heard you were actually fighting back. I didn't think anyone cared. We cared. We just didn't think we could win. He looked at his companions. But maybe if we'd stood together back then, things would have been different. Maybe, Catherine said. But you're standing now. That counts for something. They stayed through the afternoon, making their presence known, making sure anyone watching understood this wasn't just one widow anymore. This was people finding their spines after years of bending. By evening, most had ridden back to wherever they'd come from. Catherine lingered. He's not going to let this go, she said. I know. The auction's still happening. You still need that tax money. I know that too. Where's your friend? The one who was helping you? Riding to the Capitol. Should be there by now. Filing federal claims. Making everything official. That helps long term. But short term? Short term? I'm still broke and out of time. Catherine pulled an envelope from her pocket. I talked to the families. We pooled what we could. It's not much, but... Evelyn opened it. $40 in bills and coin. I can't take this. You can, and you will. Consider it an investment. You win, we all win. You lose, Catherine shrugged. Then at least we tried. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We've still got 3 days, and Lang's not going to sit quiet. She rode out as full dark settled. Evelyn went inside, counted the money twice, and felt the weight of it. $40 plus her 11 cents. Still $22 short, but closer than she'd been. Close enough to hope. Which might be the most dangerous thing of all. She fell asleep at the table again, exhausted beyond measure, and woke to someone shaking her shoulder. Mama. Evelyn jerked awake. Mary stood beside her, Sarah behind her, both girls looking scared. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the Harrisons. Mrs. Harrison sent us home, said she couldn't risk the trouble anymore. Evelyn felt anger spike. When? Just now. She had one of her boys bring us back. Did she say anything else? Mary nodded. She said you should leave. Take us and go before it's too late. Evelyn pulled her daughters close, feeling them shake. It's all right. We're okay. Are we? Mary asked. Because it doesn't feel okay. I know, honey, but we're going to be fine. She didn't know if that was true.
didn't know if anything would be fine ever again. But she held her girls and tried to believe it anyway. The next 2 days blurred together. Evelyn kept the girls close, worked the land like nothing was wrong, watched the road for signs of Jonah or trouble, or both. Catherine rode out each morning to check on them, bringing food and news. Lang had gone quiet, which somehow felt worse than his threats. "He's planning something," Catherine said on the second day. "I know. The auction's tomorrow. I know that too. You got the rest of the money?" "Not yet." Catherine looked at her. "Evelyn, I know. But Jonah will be back. He'll have the federal filings, proof of our claims. That has to count for something." "It counts, but it doesn't pay taxes." She rode off, and Evelyn went back to pretending everything was normal, pretending she had a plan beyond prayer and stubbornness. That night, Mary asked the question Evelyn had been avoiding. "What happens tomorrow if we don't have the money?" "We'll have it. But what if we don't?" Evelyn looked at her daughter's serious face. "Then we fight anyway. We make sure everyone knows why we're losing, make sure Lang's victory costs him something. That's not really winning." "No, but it's not really losing either." Mary considered this. "I don't understand grown-up answers." "Sometimes I don't either, honey." They slept fitfully, all three of them in the main room with the rifle by the door. Evelyn woke every hour to check outside, to watch for movement, to wait for dawn and the auction and whatever came with it. Morning arrived cold and pale. Evelyn dressed her girls in their best clothes, not much better than their everyday ones, but clean at least. She brushed their hair and tried not to think about what came next. The auction was set for noon at the county office. Evelyn had two options: show up with $63 or show up and watch Lang buy her land for pennies. She chose to show up. They walked to town together, the three of them. People watched from windows and doorways, but nobody spoke. The main street was fuller than usual. News had spread, and people wanted to see how this ended. The county office steps were crowded. Lang stood to one side with his lawyer and his men. Simmons waited by the door, looking pleased with himself. Sheriff Porter watched the crowd, hand near his gun. Catherine was there too, along with a handful of the families who'd stood with Evelyn 2 days before. Not enough to matter in any practical sense, but enough to witness. Evelyn climbed the steps, her daughters flanking her, and faced Simmons. "I'm here for the auction." "You bring the tax payment?" "Not yet." Simmons smiled. "Then you're just here to watch." "Maybe." Lang approached, confident now. "Mrs. Cross, I'm sorry it came to this." "No, you're not. You had chances to do this differently. So did you." The clock in the tower struck noon. Simmons pulled out his papers. By order of the county, property designated as Lot 47, Section 12, is hereby offered for public auction to satisfy unpaid tax debt of $63. He looked around. Opening bid is set at tax debt amount. "Do I hear $63? "63, Lang said immediately. "Any other bids?" Silence. Evelyn stood frozen, watching her life get sold to the man who'd tried to burn it down. "Going once," Simmons said. Evelyn opened her mouth, though she had no idea what words would come out. "Going twice. Hold it." Everyone turned. A rider was coming up the street fast, horse-lathered and breathing hard. He pulled up in front of the county office and dismounted. Jonah Hale, looking like he'd ridden through hell and back. He climbed the steps and handed Simmons a folder. Federal Land Office filing. Water rights claimed and registered as of yesterday, 4 p.m. Mineral survey requested and approved. Property designated as protected pending federal review. Simmons opened the folder, scanned the documents. His face went pale. "This can't be." "It is. Check the seals. Check the signatures. Federal Registry supersedes county auction authority on properties with active claims." Lang grabbed the folder, read through it. His expression went dark. "This is a delay tactic. It's federal law," Jonah said. "Property can't be auctioned while mineral rights are being surveyed." "How long does that take?" 6 months minimum." 6 months? "Could be longer. Depends on the survey findings." Evelyn stared at Jonah, at the papers, at Lang's furious face. "Does this means the auction's canceled?" Jonah said.
Means you've got time to figure out the taxes. But how? He looked at her, and something in his eyes said there was more to this story than he was telling. Found some people who owed favors, called them in. Lang stepped forward. This is fraud. You can't just manufacture federal claims. I'm not manufacturing anything. Water's real. Mineral deposits are probable. Survey's legitimate. Jonah handed him another paper.
And here's documentation that you've been filing false counterclaims using forged historical usage rights. Federal marshals investigating. Might want to talk to your lawyer about that. The color drained from Lang's face. He looked at the paper, at Jonah, at the crowd gathering closer to hear what was happening. You have no proof. I have 6 families willing to testify about your business practices. I have documents showing a pattern of fraud. I have enough to make your life very complicated for a very long time. Jonah's voice went quiet. Or you could walk away, cut your losses, move on, leave these people alone. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. Take it or don't. They stood there on the county office steps, and Evelyn watched Victor Lang realize he'd lost. Maybe not everything, maybe not permanently, but here, today, in front of the whole town, he'd lost. Lang turned to his lawyer. File a complaint with the territorial governor. Federal overreach, improper procedure, whatever applies. That'll take months, the lawyer said. I don't care how long it takes. File it. He walked down the steps and mounted his horse. Before riding off, he looked back at Evelyn. This isn't over, Yes, it is, she said. You just don't know it yet. He rode away, and the crowd erupted in confused conversation. Simmons looked lost, shuffling papers like they might tell him what to do. Porter seemed relieved it hadn't come to violence. Jonah turned to Evelyn. We should talk. Yeah, she agreed, we should. They walked back to the cabin in silence, the girls running ahead while Evelyn and Jonah kept a careful distance between them. The crowd had dispersed slowly, people lingering to talk about what they'd witnessed, how the Widow Cross had somehow beaten Victor Lang at his own game. Evelyn heard the murmurs but didn't stop to acknowledge them. Her mind was too full of questions. Once home, she sent Mary and Sarah to gather eggs, a task that would keep them occupied and out of earshot. Then she turned to Jonah, who stood by the window looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. How much did it cost? He didn't pretend not to understand. Doesn't matter. It matters to me. Those federal filings, getting a surveyor out on short notice, expediting the claims process, none of that's free. Had some money saved. How much, Jonah? He was quiet for a long time. Finally, $300, give or take. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. $300, more money than she'd see in 5 years of good harvests. You spent your entire savings on my land claim. Our land claim. If the water's real, if the minerals pan out, we both benefit. We didn't agree to be partners. We didn't agree to a lot of things. Doesn't make them less true. Evelyn sat down at the table, her legs suddenly unsteady. I can't pay you back, not for years, maybe not ever. Didn't ask you to. Then what are you asking for? Jonah turned from the window, and she saw something in his face she hadn't noticed before. Not just exhaustion, but fear. The kind that came from putting everything on one roll of the dice and waiting to see if it came up right. I'm asking for a chance to do something that matters, to help someone who deserves it instead of... He stopped, pushed a hand through his hair. I told you what I did before, who I worked for, the people I helped push off their land. I remember. What I didn't tell you is how it ended. There was a family in Colorado, father, mother, 3 kids. They had a ranch, nothing special, but it was theirs. The man I worked for wanted it, sent me to convince them to sell. Evelyn waited. I did my job, found their weak points, applied pressure, made them think they had no choice. They sold for half what it was worth. His voice went flat. 2 months later, the mother died. Some kind of fever, the local doctor said, but I think it was just giving up. The father shot himself a week after that. Kids went to an orphanage in Denver. That's not your fault, isn't it? I set the dominoes falling. I made them believe the lie that they couldn't win. You were doing a job. That's what I told myself, right up until I saw those 3 kids standing at their parents' graves with nobody left who gave a damn about them. He met her eyes. They were younger than Mary, about Sarah's age. Evelyn understood then. This wasn't about her land or Lang's corruption or even justice. This was about 3 children Jonah couldn't save, trying to balance against 2 he still could. So I'm your redemption. You're not my anything. You're just, he struggled for words. You're someone fighting for something real, for your kids, for your home. And I have the means to help, so I am. It's that simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, he agreed, but it's still worth doing. The girls returned with a basket of eggs, and the conversation ended. Evelyn cooked dinner while Jonah repaired a loose board on the porch, and they moved around each other with the careful choreography of people who'd said too much and not enough all at once. That evening, Catherine rode out with news. Lang's lawyer filed the complaint. Federal overreach, improper procedure, the works. How long until they rule on it? Months, maybe a year. But here's the thing. While they're investigating his complaint, they're also investigating him. Those families I got testimony from, federal marshal wants to talk to all of them. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. So he can't touch us while the investigation's ongoing. He can try, but every move he makes now is under scrutiny. He's backed into a corner. Cornered animals are the most dangerous kind. True, but they're also the most desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. Catherine stayed for coffee, and the 3 of them sat around the table while the girls played in the loft. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn allowed herself to think past the next crisis, to imagine actually keeping this land, building something on it, giving her daughters a future that didn't involve running or hiding or counting coins that never multiplied. What happens with the taxes now, she asked. Still owed, Catherine said, but the deadline's extended pending the federal review. You've got time to figure it out. How much time? 6 months, minimum. Probably longer. Evelyn looked at Jonah. And the money you spent on the claims? Comes back if the survey confirms what we think is there. Water rights alone could be worth thousands once we develop them properly. And if the survey finds nothing, then we're out $300 in 6 months of waiting. Catherine leaned forward. But you don't think it'll find nothing? No, Jonah said. I think we're sitting on something valuable, real valuable. Why else would Lang fight so hard? They talked logistics after that. How to properly survey the water, what permits they'd need, who to hire for the mineral testing. It was all theoretical, built on hope and guesswork, but it felt good to plan for success instead of just fighting against failure. After Catherine left, Evelyn stood on the porch, watching the sun drop behind the western hills. Jonah joined her, keeping that careful distance. Thank you, she said. For what? For not giving up, even when I wanted to. You never wanted to give up. You're too stubborn for that. I'm tired of being stubborn, tired of fighting every single day just to stay in one place. Won't always be this hard. How do you know? Because the hard part's over. Lang's contained, the land's protected. Your daughters are safe. Everything else is just work. Evelyn almost smiled. Just work. That's your idea of easy? Compared to what we've been through? Yeah. They stood there as darkness gathered, and Evelyn felt the weight of the past weeks start to lift. Not entirely. She still had debts and worries and a future that was anything but certain. But for the first time, that future felt possible. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Not Lang, not trouble, but Fletcher and Torres riding in with official-looking documents. Preliminary survey results, Fletcher announced, spreading papers across Evelyn's porch table. Wanted to deliver them in person. Evelyn's heart hammered. And you've got water, significant amounts. This aquifer runs through your entire eastern section and probably extends onto adjacent properties. Flow rate suggests it could support irrigation for several hundred acres, maybe more. Torres added, that makes your land a primary water source for the valley. Once it's officially registered, you'll control water rights for a substantial region. How substantial? Every property downstream. Anyone who wants to develop land in this valley will need your permission to access that water. The implications settled over Evelyn like snow. Control of the water meant control of growth, of development, of who prospered and who struggled. It meant power she'd never wanted and responsibility she hadn't prepared for. What about the minerals? Jonah asked. Fletcher's expression shifted. That's where it gets interesting. We found silver deposits, but not where the old railroad survey indicated. They're deeper, running through a fault line that crosses your property and 3 others. How much silver? Hard to say without full testing, but enough to warrant commercial interest,
Maybe enough to justify a small mining operation. Torres pulled out a map marked with survey lines and mineral indicators. Here's the problem. The silver crosses property boundaries. Any mining operation would need cooperation between multiple landowners, which means negotiation, profit sharing, legal agreements. Who owns the adjacent properties? Evelyn asked, though she already knew the answer. Victor Lang owns 2 of them. The third belongs to the Harrison family. You see, Catherine had ridden out that morning and stood listening from the yard. Now she spoke up. So Lang can't develop the silver without Evelyn's cooperation, and she can't develop it without his. Exactly, Fletcher said. You're tied together whether you like it or not. Evelyn looked at Jonah. He's going to love that. He's going to hate it, which might work in our favor. Torres explained the next steps: formal registration of the water rights, filing mineral claims, establishing legal boundaries. It would take months and cost money they didn't have, but it was possible. For the first time, everything they'd fought for felt within reach. After Fletcher and Torres left, Evelyn walked out to the eastern boundary where they'd first dug for water. The hole was still there, partially filled but visible, evidence of the day she'd decided to fight back instead of just enduring. Jonah found her there an hour later. What are you thinking? That I don't know how to do any of this. Manage water rights, negotiate with miners, run a business. I'm a farmer's widow with 2 kids and no education past 8th grade. So you learn. That easy? Didn't say easy, said possible. Evelyn kicked at the dirt. Lang's never going to agree to work with me. Not after everything. Then we find another way. Buy out one of his properties, trade water access for mineral rights, bring in outside investors who can force his hand. With what money? The water's worth something right now, today. Once it's registered, you can lease access, sell rights, use it as collateral for loans. And how do I know who to trust? How do I know I'm not just trading one Lang for another? Jonah was quiet for a moment. You don't. But you make the best choices you can with the information you have. And you keep people around who'll tell you when you're wrong. People like you? If you want. She looked at him, this complicated man who'd appeared with bread and stayed for reasons that were equal parts redemption and stubbornness. You planning to stick around then? If you'll have me. As what? Partner? Hired hand? Friend? Whichever you need. Evelyn felt something shift between them, some question that had been hanging unspoken, finally demanding attention. But before she could find words for it, Mary's voice called from the cabin. Mama, someone's coming. They hurried back to find a rider approaching fast, not threatening, but urgent. As they got closer, Evelyn recognized the Harrison boy who'd brought her daughters back. He pulled up, breathing hard. Mrs. Cross, you need to come quick. What's wrong? It's Mr. Lang. He's at our place talking to my pa about the silver deposits, saying if they partner up, they can force you out, develop the minerals without your cooperation. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Can they do that? But Jonah's face went hard. If Harrison agrees to let Lang use his property as access to the fault line, maybe. Depends on how the mineral rights are structured. My pa's listening, the boy continued. He's talking like he might agree. Ma sent me to warn you. Evelyn looked at Jonah. What do we do? We go talk to Harrison, make him understand what he's getting into. They rode out immediately, leaving the girls with instructions to stay inside. The Harrison place sat 2 miles east, a well-maintained ranch with 6 strong sons and a patriarch who'd always valued profit over principle. They found Lang's horse tied out front, and through the window they could see him sitting at the Harrison table like he belonged there. Evelyn dismounted and walked straight in without knocking. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. Mrs. Cross, Mr. Harrison said, looking caught. This is a private discussion. Not when it's about my land, it isn't. Lang smiled. Actually, we're discussing Mr. Harrison's land and how he might maximize its value. By helping you steal what you couldn't take legally? By forming a legitimate business partnership,
Something you might consider yourself if you weren't so stubborn. Harrison shifted uncomfortably. Lang here says the silver runs through both our properties. Says we could develop it together, split the profits. And cut me out entirely, Evelyn said. You'd still have your water. That's worth plenty. But worth less if you're mining next door, contaminating the aquifer, destroying the land. Lang stood. We'd operate responsibly, environmental protections, proper drainage. Like you operated responsibly when you burned my shed, when you threatened my family, when you tried to steal my land through fraud and intimidation? The room went quiet. Mrs. Harrison spoke from the doorway, her voice hard. That true, Mr. Lang? You the one been causing trouble for the Widow Cross? I've been pursuing legitimate business interests. He's been terrorizing her, Jonah said flatly. I've got documentation, witness statements, pattern of harassment going back 3 years across multiple properties. Lang's face flushed. That's slander. It's truth. And if Harrison partners with you, he becomes part of it. Federal investigation's already ongoing. He really want his name attached to yours when the marshal comes calling? Harrison looked between them, calculation clear on his face. There's an investigation? Federal land fraud, Evelyn said. Multiple counts, multiple properties. Lang's been filing false claims for years. Yours might be next if you let him get his hooks in. That's a lie, Lang said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Mrs. Harrison stepped fully into the room. I think you should leave, Mr. Lang. We're in the middle of negotiations. We're done negotiating. My husband might be tempted by silver profits, but I'm not risking federal prison for your schemes. Harrison looked like he wanted to argue, but one glance at his wife's face killed that impulse. Maybe we should table this discussion. There's nothing to table, Lang said. This is a legitimate opportunity that you're trying to force because you can't access the silver on your own land, Jonah interrupted. Your properties are positioned wrong. The fault line runs deepest under Crossland, shallower under Harrison's, barely touches yours. You need both of them to make mining profitable, and Mrs. Cross won't deal with you. Lang's jaw clenched. She'll deal with me or she'll get nothing. I can tie up those claims in court for years. Try it, Evelyn said. Spend your money on lawyers while the federal investigation drains what's left. See who breaks first. They stared at each other, and Evelyn saw the exact moment Lang realized he'd lost this round too. His empire was crumbling, one property at a time, and all because one widow had refused to bend. He walked to the door, stopped, turned back. You think you've won. You haven't. This valley isn't big enough for both of us, and I've been here longer. Then maybe it's time you left, Evelyn said. Lang left without another word, and the silence he left behind felt heavy. Harrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Cross, I hope you understand. I understand you were willing to partner with a man who tried to destroy me. I understand that money matters more to you than what's right. Business is business. No, business is just the excuse people use when they don't want to admit they're being cruel. She walked out, Jonah following. They mounted up and rode back in silence, and Evelyn felt the weight of everything settling on her shoulders. She'd stopped Lang again, protected her claim again, but the fight wasn't over. It wouldn't be over as long as Lang remained in the valley with resources and anger and nothing left to lose. That night, Catherine brought more news. Lang had been called to answer questions for the federal investigation. His lawyer had advised him to stay quiet, but Lang being Lang, he'd talked anyway. Made threats, implied connections, suggested the whole thing was political persecution. He made it worse for himself, Catherine said. Much worse. The marshals talking about filing criminal charges, not just civil penalties. How long until that happens? Weeks, maybe months. But it's happening. Lang's going down and he knows it. Evelyn should have felt relieved, victorious even, but all she felt was tired. What happens to his properties if he's convicted? Depends. If he's found guilty of fraud, they could be seized, auctioned off, redistributed to original owners if claims are proven. So the people he pushed out could get their land back. Some of them. If they can prove their cases. It was something. Not justice in any clean sense, but closer than most people got. Evelyn tried to take comfort in that. The next weeks passed in a strange limbo. The federal investigation proceeded slowly, grinding through depositions and documents. Lang stayed mostly quiet, his presence in town diminishing as his legal troubles mounted. Evelyn worked her land, planned for the water development, tried to imagine a future that didn't involve constant fighting. Jonah stayed. Not in the house, propriety still mattered, even if the town's opinion of her had improved, but close. He finished the irrigation ditch Thomas had started, repaired fences, helped Mary and Sarah with chores. He became part of their rhythm without announcing it, fitting into the spaces Thomas had left empty. One evening, 6 weeks after the canceled auction, Evelyn found him by the well. "We need to talk about the money." He looked up from the rope he was splicing. "What about it?" "The $300 you spent. I want to pay you back. We've been through this." "Not properly. You made us partners without asking. Fine. I accept that. But partners split costs and profits, so we need a formal agreement." Jonas set down the rope. "You want a contract. I want to know where we stand." They went inside, and Evelyn spread paper on the table. She'd been working on this for days, trying to figure out fair terms that didn't leave her indebted forever. "Here's what I'm thinking. You put in $300 for the federal claims. I put in the land and the existing improvements. We split any profits from water leasing or mineral development 60-40. 60 to you? To me. It's my land, my risk, my daughter's future." Jonah studied the paper. "Fair enough, but I want to say in decisions. Who we lease to, how we develop, what operations we allow. Equal say? Equal say." Evelyn considered. Equal partnership meant sharing control, trusting Jonah with decisions that affected her daughter's security. A month ago, that would have been impossible. Now, "All right, equal say on business decisions, but the land stays in my name, passes to my daughters if something happens to me." Agreed. They shook hands, and Evelyn felt the relationship shift into something more solid, less about rescue and gratitude, more about mutual investment and shared risk. "There's one more thing," she said. "What's that?" "If we're partners, I need to know you're staying. Not just until Lang's dealt with or the claims are settled, actually staying." Jonah met her eyes. "Where else would I go?" "I don't know. Back to wherever you came from. On to the next person who needs saving." "I'm not saving anyone. I'm building something. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah. Saving is temporary. Building is permanent." He paused. "At least I want it to be." Evelyn felt heat in her face and looked away. "The girls are getting attached to you. That a problem?" "It is if you leave." "Then I won't leave." "People say that. Then they do anyway." "I'm not people, and I'm not Thomas." The name hung between them. Evelyn hadn't spoken it in weeks, hadn't let herself think about her dead husband while navigating her complicated feelings about the living man in front of her. "Thomas died for this land," she said quietly. "Worked himself into an early grave trying to make it produce. I'm not sure he'd approve of what we're doing." "What are we doing that he wouldn't approve of?" "Partnering with someone he never met. Trusting a stranger with his daughter's inheritance. Planning to develop water and minerals instead of just farming. He's dead, Evelyn. He doesn't get a vote." The bluntness should have hurt. Instead, it felt like permission. Permission to move forward, to make decisions Thomas couldn't make for her, to build a life that looked different from what they'd planned. "I know," she said, "but it still feels like betraying him." "It's not betrayal to survive. It's not betrayal to do what's necessary." "Even if necessary includes you?" Jonah's expression softened. "Especially if it includes me." They stood there in the lamplight, and Evelyn felt the question she'd been avoiding finally demand an answer. What was Jonah to her? Partner, yes. Friend, definitely. But underneath that? The door burst open. Mary ran in, eyes wide. "Mama, there's fire in town. Big fire. Everyone's going to help." Evelyn looked out the window and saw orange glow against the night sky. Too bright, too big. Her first thought was Lang retaliating, but that didn't fit. This was public, visible, desperate. "Stay here with Sarah," she told Mary. To Jonah, "We should go." They rode into town to find the general store burning, flames climbing into the night sky while people formed bucket lines. Evelyn joined without thinking, passing water from the well to the fire, while others did the same. It took 2 hours to get it under control. By then, the store was gutted. a smoking shell. The owner, a man named Peterson, sat on the ground looking broken. "How'd it start?" someone asked. "Don't know. I closed up same as always, locked the doors, checked the lamps. Everything was fine." Sheriff Porter examined the remains. "Back doors forced. Looks deliberate." The crowd murmured, everyone thinking the same thing, Lang, but then someone shouted from down the street, "Lang's place is burning too." Evelyn turned to see another fire, this one at the land office Lang owned, smaller than the store fire but growing fast. The crowd split, some staying to watch the store, others running to fight the new blaze. Evelyn stayed where she was, understanding settling cold in her stomach. This wasn't Lang attacking. This was Lang being attacked. It took another hour to control the second fire. When it was done, Simmons stood in the ruins of the land office, his face ashen. All his records, all his documents, everything that proved who owned what, gone. "This is a disaster," he said. "Property deeds, tax records, claim filings, all of it burned. Copies are at the county seat," Porter said. "Some, not all, and nothing recent. Everything from the last 6 months is gone." Evelyn looked at Jonah. "The water claims, the mineral surveys." "We've got copies," he said. "Federal office has the originals. But the local records that prove ownership, gone." The implications rippled through the crowd. Without local records, proving who owned what became complicated. Old claims would stand, but recent transactions, new filings, disputed boundaries, all of it thrown into chaos. And in that chaos, men like Lang could operate. Or could have if he hadn't been so focused on Evelyn that he'd made enemies everywhere else. Catherine appeared out of the crowd. "This wasn't Lang." "How do you know?" "Because I was watching his place when it started burning. He wasn't anywhere near it. He was at the saloon, drinking. 3 witnesses can confirm it." "Then who?" Catherine looked around at the gathered crowd. "Who do you think? Every person here has a reason to want those records destroyed. Every person who lost land, who got pushed out, who signed papers under duress, all of that becomes questionable without documentation. That's anarchy. That's opportunity. Clean slate, fresh start." Evelyn understood then. This wasn't about revenge against Lang specifically. It was about erasing the past 3 years of his manipulation, about giving people a chance to reclaim what had been taken. "What happens now?" she asked Porter. The sheriff looked exhausted. "We rebuild the records as best we can. People bring in their deeds, their papers. We cross-reference with county copies. Takes time, but it's doable. And claims that can't be verified? Get disputed, probably end up in court." Which meant years of legal battles, exactly what Lang had been threatening to do to Evelyn. Except now everyone faced the same uncertainty. The fires burned down to embers, and people drifted home as dawn approached. Evelyn and Jonah rode back in silence, both too tired to process what it meant. At the cabin, Mary and Sarah were asleep in the loft. Evelyn stood in the doorway watching them breathe. "Everything's going to be uncertain again," she said. "It already was," Jonah replied. "This just makes it official." "What do we do?" "Same thing we've been doing. Hold our ground, prove our claims, wait for the dust to settle. And if Lang uses this chaos to come after us again, then we deal with it, together." Evelyn nodded, too tired to argue. She sent Jonah to the barn and crawled into bed, her mind spinning with implications and possibilities and fears she couldn't name. She dreamed of fire and water, of land that belonged to everyone and no one, of her daughters growing up in a valley that couldn't decide if it was being born or dying. When she woke, it was to the smell of coffee and fresh bread. Jonah had left both on the porch, along with a note. "Federal marshals coming tomorrow to inspect the fire damage. Might want to have our documents ready." Evelyn smiled despite everything, always planning ahead, always thinking 3 moves forward. She could learn to trust that, was learning, whether she wanted to or not. The future was uncertain. The valley was chaos. Lang was still out there, wounded, but not finished. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn Cross felt like she was winning. Not the war, maybe, but battles. Enough battles to make the war winnable. And that was something. The federal marshal arrived 3 days after the fires, a lean man named Garrett, who looked like he'd spent his life chasing people through hard country and didn't have much patience left for nonsense. He examined the burned buildings, interviewed witnesses, and made notes in a leather journal that he kept close like scripture. Evelyn met him at the county office ruins, Jonah beside her, their documents organized in a folder that felt too thin to matter. "Mrs. Cross," Garrett said, tipping his hat, "I've been reading about your situation." "What situation would that be? I seem to have several." A hint of a smile crossed his weathered face. "The one involving Victor Lang and allegations of land fraud, among other things." "Among other things covers a lot of ground, Marshal." "It does, which is why I'm here." He gestured at the ruins. "These fires complicate matters. Local records destroyed, claims in dispute, makes my investigation harder."
"We have federal copies," Jonah said, offering their folder. Garrett took it, flipped through quickly. "Water rights, mineral surveys, ownership documentation. This is good. Most people don't keep duplicates." "We learned to be careful," Evelyn said. "I imagine you did." Garrett closed the folder. "Here's where things stand. Lang's under investigation for multiple counts of fraud. The fires destroyed evidence that might have helped him, but also destroyed evidence that might have convicted him. Without local records to corroborate testimony, some cases fall apart." Evelyn's stomach tightened, including ours. "Yours is solid. Federal filings trump local records, and your claim predates most of Lang's contested acquisitions, but others aren't so lucky." He looked around at the gathered crowd. "This valley's going to be tied up in litigation for years unless people are willing to negotiate." "Negotiate with Lang?" Catherine spoke up from nearby. "After everything he's done?" "Negotiate with each other," Garrett corrected. "Lang's finished here. Investigation aside, he's got creditors circling and no way to pay them. His empire's collapsing. Question is, what happens to the pieces?" The crowd murmured. Evelyn saw the calculation in people's faces. Opportunity mixed with old anger. The possibility of reclaiming losses weighed against the satisfaction of watching Lang fall completely. "What are you suggesting?" Evelyn asked. Garrett pulled out a larger document. "Territorial governors authorized a land commission. Independent review of all claims in this valley, cross-referenced with what records survived in federal filings. Everyone gets a chance to prove their case. Commission makes recommendations, governor signs off, and it's settled." "How long does that take?" 6 months maybe, but it's fair. And it's final. And Lang? Lang doesn't get a say. His properties are being held pending investigation. If he's convicted, they'll be auctioned to pay his debts and restitution to verified claimants. Catherine stepped forward. "The families he pushed out, they could get their land back? If they can prove ownership in his fraud, Commission will prioritize those cases." Evelyn watched hope flicker through the crowd. People who'd given up, who'd taken Lang's money and left, now seeing a path back to what they'd lost. It wasn't guaranteed, wasn't even likely for most of them, but it was possible, and possibility was a powerful thing. "I'll participate," she said. Garrett nodded. "Good. I'll need detailed testimony about Lang's actions toward you. Dates, conversations, witnesses, everything you can remember." "I can do that." Over the next week, Evelyn spent hours with Garrett, walking him through the entire timeline. The bread that started everything, Lang's escalating offers, the shed fire, the threats. Jonah corroborated what he'd witnessed, and Catherine brought testimony from the other families. Billy Simmons, the clerk's son who'd warned her, came forward despite his father's anger to confirm what he'd overheard. A picture emerged of systematic fraud, intimidation, and manipulation stretching back years. Lang had been careful, but not careful enough. Too many people remembered too many details, and once they started talking, it all came spilling out. The morning Garrett finished taking statements, he found Evelyn working in her garden, a small plot she'd started behind the cabin where the soil seemed less hostile. "That's quite a story you've got," he said. "It's just what happened. Most people fold when pressure gets applied like that. You didn't." Evelyn pulled a weed, tossed it aside. "Didn't have a choice. Had daughters to protect." "Everyone has a choice. You chose to fight. Stubbornness, more like." Garrett crouched down, examined her struggling tomato plants. "I've been doing this job 15 years, seen a lot of land disputes, a lot of fraud, a lot of people getting crushed by those with more money and fewer scruples. Know what the difference is between those who survive and those who don't? What? The survivors find someone to stand with them. Nobody wins alone. He glanced toward the barn where Jonah was repairing the door. You picked a good ally. I didn't pick him. He just showed up. Sometimes that's how it works. The right people appear when you need them, if you're smart enough to let them stay. Evelyn sat back on her heels. You trying to tell me something, Marshall? Just observing that you've built something here. Not just a land claim, a partnership. Don't let pride or fear or whatever else get in the way of keeping it. He stood, brushed dirt from his knees. I'll be back in 2 months for the commission hearing. Make sure you've got all your documentation ready. And Mrs. Cross? You're going to win this. Don't sabotage yourself before you get there. He rode out, and Evelyn sat in her garden thinking about his words. Pride, fear, both things she had in abundance, both things that had protected her, but also isolated her. That evening, she found Jonah finishing the barn door. We need to talk about what happens next. He set down his hammer. All right. The commission hearing, the land settlement. Assuming everything goes our way, we're going to own valuable property. Water rights, possible mineral deposits. Real assets. Yeah. That changes things. We'll need to develop the water, lease the grazing rights, maybe negotiate with mining interests if the silver's real. That's complicated work. It is. So we need a real partnership agreement, not just a handshake, something legal that protects both of us and the girls. Jonah studied her face. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things. Evelyn took a breath. You've put your savings into this land. You've risked your safety, your reputation. You've become part of my daughter's lives. That's not nothing. Didn't do it expecting payment. I know, but you deserve security too. So I'm proposing we formalize the partnership. Split ownership 50-50, put it in writing, file it with the commission. You sure about that? Your daughter's inheritance will be protected. I've talked to a lawyer. We can structure it so the land passes to Mary and Sarah, but you maintain lifetime water and mineral rights. If you stay, you benefit. If you leave, she stopped. If you leave, you still get a share. Jonah was quiet for a long time. You're giving me half your land. I'm giving you half of our land because that's what it is. Ours. You earned it. By showing up with bread? By staying. By fighting when you could have walked away. By becoming someone my daughters trust and She stumbled over the words. Someone I don't want to lose. The air between them shifted. Jonah stepped closer. Evelyn, don't make this complicated. It's a business arrangement. Is it? Mostly. What's the part that isn't? She met his eyes. You know what it is. I want to hear you say it. Evelyn felt heat rise in her face. I'm not 17 anymore. I don't have pretty words for what I feel. Don't need pretty, just honest. Fine, honest. She squared her shoulders. I'm scared of depending on you, scared of my girls getting hurt if you leave, scared of wanting something for myself instead of just surviving day to day. But I'm more scared of pushing you away because I'm too proud or too frightened to admit I need help. That's a start. A start. Yeah, because I need to be honest too. Jonah took her hand, his calloused palm rough against hers. I came here trying to fix what I broke somewhere else, trying to save people I couldn't save then. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about redemption. What's it about now? You, your daughters, this land, building something that lasts. He squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere, Evelyn. Not unless you tell me to. I won't tell you to. Then we're in agreement. They stood there in the fading light, hands joined, the weight of everything spoken and unspoken settling around them. Mary's voice called from the cabin, breaking the moment. Mama, supper's ready. Evelyn smiled. We should go in. Yeah. But Jonah didn't let go of her hand. After the commission hearing, after everything settles, we should talk about the future. Really talk. What about the future? About what it looks like. Who's in it? How we build it. Evelyn understood what he wasn't quite asking. One crisis at a time. Fair enough. They walked to the cabin together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn felt something like contentment.
Not happiness. That seemed too big, too fragile, but contentment. The sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. The next 2 months passed in relative peace. Lang stayed away, his legal troubles mounting. The valley settled into uneasy cooperation as people prepared testimony for the commission. Catherine organized the displaced families, helped them gather documentation, coached them on how to present their cases. Evelyn worked her land, developed her garden, taught Sarah to read, and Mary to calculate crop yields. Jonah finished the irrigation system, and water began flowing through channels Thomas had started but never completed. The first green shoots appeared in fields that had been barren for years. One afternoon, Mrs. Harrison visited, not to criticize or condemn, but to apologize. "I was wrong," she said stiffly. "About you. About your situation. About encouraging you to quit." Evelyn poured coffee. "What changed your mind?" "My sons. They asked why we didn't help you when you needed it, asked if we were the kind of people who only stood with winners." She looked uncomfortable. Made me think about what kind of example I've been setting. It's not easy to stand up to someone like Lang. No, but you did it. Without any guarantees, without knowing how it would turn out. Just because it was right. Mrs. Harrison met her eyes. "That takes courage I didn't have. Had children to protect. That gives you courage you didn't know existed. Maybe. Or maybe you're just stronger than most." After she left, Mary asked, "Why'd she really come?" "To make peace, I think." "Because we're winning?" "Because she's realizing winning and losing aren't the only measures that matter." Evelyn pulled her daughter close. "Remember that. Sometimes the bravest thing is admitting you were wrong." The commission hearing was held in the county courthouse, a building that had survived the fires through luck and a good stone foundation. Federal representatives sat behind a long table, Garrett among them, while families presented their cases one by one. The Thorntons went first, showing documents proving Lang had pressured them into selling below value. The Mendez family followed with similar testimony. One after another, the displaced families made their cases, and the pattern became undeniable. Lang sat in the back, his lawyer beside him, looking diminished. The man who'd once controlled half the valley now faced ruin, his empire dismantled by the very people he'd crushed. When Evelyn's turn came, she walked to the front with Jonah beside her. She laid out her documentation, the tax notices, the survey maps, the water claim filings, the federal registrations. Then she told her story, simple and direct, without embellishment or drama. The commission listened without interrupting. When she finished, the lead representative asked, "Mrs. Cross, if your water claim is certified and mineral rights are confirmed, what are your plans for development?" "Lease the water to families who need it for farming. Fair rates, long-term contracts. Use mineral rights as collateral for loans to improve the land. Maybe allow limited mining if it can be done without destroying the aquifer. And Mr. Lang's adjacent properties, if they're auctioned, I'd consider bidding on them, not to control them, but to protect the water source. Make sure development happens responsibly." "With what capital?" "Partnership investment. We've secured interest from investors in Denver who see value in controlled, sustainable development." It wasn't entirely true. They'd had preliminary conversations, nothing concrete, but it sounded official, and the commission seemed satisfied. Lang's lawyer stood. "Objection. Mrs. Cross's claim is based on surveys that were never verified before the fires. Without local records, federal records supersede local documentation," Garrett interrupted. "And her claim was filed and registered before any dispute arose. It stands." The lawyer sat down, and Lang's face went gray. The hearing continued through the afternoon. By evening, the commission had heard 24 cases, seen hundreds of pages of documentation, and assembled a clear picture of systematic fraud and manipulation. The lead representative addressed the gathered crowd. "This commission will deliberate over the next week. Recommendations will be submitted to the territorial governor for final approval. Expect decisions within 30 days. People filed out quietly, exhausted by the emotional weight of reliving their losses. Evelyn stood on the courthouse steps watching the sun set over the valley that had cost so much and might finally be hers to keep. Catherine joined her. "You did good in there. Think it's enough?" "I think you made your case. The rest is up to them. And if they rule against us, they won't. Not with that much evidence. But Evelyn had learned not to trust certainty. Too many things could still go wrong, too many ways for this to fall apart. The 30 days crawled past. Evelyn worked her land, watched her garden grow, taught her daughters, and tried not to check the road every hour for messengers. Jonah built a proper fence around the eastern boundary where the water source sat, visible declaration of intent to develop and protect. On the 28th day, Garrett returned. He rode straight to Evelyn's cabin and dismounted without ceremony. Commissions reached their decisions. Governor signed off this morning. Evelyn's heart hammered. And your water claim is certified. Mineral rights are confirmed pending geological survey, which you've got 6 months to complete. Full ownership of your 40 acres is undisputed. What about the adjacent properties? Lang's been ordered to forfeit them as restitution. They'll be auctioned next month. You'll have first option to bid. Evelyn felt her knees go weak. Jonah steadied her with a hand on her arm. What about the other families? Catherine asked, having appeared from somewhere. Thorntons get their land back, full restitution. Mendez family likewise. In total, 17 properties are being returned to original owners or their heirs. Another 8 are being auctioned to pay Lang's debts and fines. And Lang himself? Garrett's expression hardened. Criminal charges are being filed. Fraud, intimidation, destruction of property. He's looking at 5 to 10 years in territorial prison, possibly more. The news rippled through the valley over the next hours. People who'd lost everything were getting second chances. Families who'd been scattered were coming home. And Victor Lang, who'd built an empire on other people's suffering, was facing justice at last. That evening, Evelyn called a meeting at her cabin. The families who'd stood with her, who'd testified at the hearing, who'd found courage in community. They gathered on her porch and in her yard, sharing coffee and the tentative hope of people who'd survived disaster. We've got decisions to make, Evelyn said, about how we develop this valley, who benefits, how we protect what we've reclaimed. You're talking about organizing, one of the men said, forming some kind of association. I'm talking about making sure we don't recreate what we just escaped, about building something better. They talked long into the night, making plans that were more aspiration than concrete detail. A cooperative for water management, shared equipment purchases, collective bargaining for shipping rates and supply costs, small steps toward ensuring that strength came from unity rather than individual accumulation. By the time people dispersed, Evelyn felt exhausted and energized all at once. The work was just beginning, but it was work with purpose, work that built instead of just survived. Jonah lingered after the others left. They stood in the yard under stars that seemed brighter than usual. Or maybe Evelyn was just seeing them clearly for the first time in months. You're good at this, he said. At what? Leading, getting people to work together. I'm just trying to keep everyone from making the same mistakes. It's more than that. You're building something real here. Evelyn looked at her cabin, at the fields where green was beginning to show, at the silhouette of hills that had felt like prison walls and now felt like home. We're building it, not just me. Yeah, Pod, Jonah moved closer. About that conversation we put off, about the future. Think it's time? I think we're out of excuses. Evelyn's heart sped up. All right then, what does your future look like? Has you in it, and Mary and Sarah, and this land that we're making into something worth keeping, he paused. Has me staying not because you need help, but because this is home. Is that a proposal? It's a statement of intent. Proposal comes later if you're open to it. How much later? Soon as you're ready to hear it. Evelyn thought about Thomas, about the life they'd planned that had ended too soon, about grief and guilt and the fear that moving forward meant forgetting. But standing here with Jonah under the Wyoming stars, she understood that memory and future weren't enemies. She could honor what Thomas had built while creating something new with the man who'd helped her save it. Ask me after the harvest, she said. After we know the water development's working and the garden's producing and the girls are settled. Ask me when life is boring and normal instead of crisis after crisis. That might take a while. Normal doesn't seem to find us easily. Then you'll wait? Jonah smiled. I've waited this long. Few more months won't kill me.
They went inside, and Evelyn checked on her daughters, both sleeping soundly, both safe, both with a future that looked nothing like the disaster she'd feared weeks ago. She touched Mary's hair, adjusted Sarah's blanket, and felt gratitude so intense it hurt. The next weeks brought the auction of Lang's properties. Evelyn bid on the 2 parcels adjacent to hers, using water rights as collateral for a loan from the Denver investors who'd decided her venture was worth backing. She won both, doubling her holdings and gaining control of the primary water source for the entire valley. Other families bought back their lost land at fair prices, no longer inflated by Lang's manipulation. The Harrison family purchased one of Lang's commercial buildings in town, turned it into a community hall. Catherine Wells started a newspaper, determined to keep people informed so power could never again concentrate without scrutiny. Slowly, piece by piece, the valley rebuilt itself. Victor Lang was convicted on 14 counts of fraud and sentenced to 8 years in territorial prison. His remaining assets were liquidated, restitution paid to verified victims. The man who'd once controlled everything left with nothing, and Evelyn found she felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, just relief that it was over. Harvest came in late October. Evelyn's expanded fields produced more grain than she'd seen in 5 years. The garden yielded vegetables that fed her family and had surplus to sell. The water flowed clean and steady, and surveys confirmed silver deposits worth developing under careful conditions. On a cool evening with the first hint of winter in the air, Jonah found Evelyn in her garden pulling the last of the tomatoes. "Looks like normal finally found us," he said. "Feels strange." "Good strange or bad strange?" "Just strange. I keep waiting for the next disaster. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe we get to just live for a while." Evelyn set down her basket and looked at him. "Is this the conversation?" "Could be. If you're ready." "I don't know if I am, but ask anyway." Jonah pulled something from his pocket, a simple gold band that looked old and well cared for. "This was my mother's. Only thing I kept when I left home. Been carrying it around, figuring someday I'd find someone worth giving it to." "Is ansvarslygus pat." "Jonah, I'm not asking you to forget Thomas. Not asking you to replace him or pretend the past didn't happen. I'm just asking if you can see a future that has both of us in it, as partners, as more than partners." Evelyn took the ring, felt its weight. The girls already asked their permission. Mary said it was about time. Sarah wanted to know if you'd wear a white dress. Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. "You asked my 9-year-old for permission? Seemed right. This affects them too." She turned the ring in her fingers, watching light catch the gold. A week ago, she might have said no. Might have cited propriety or grief or fear. But standing in her garden with vegetables she'd grown in soil she'd fought to keep, with a man who'd stood beside her through the worst of it, the answer felt obvious. Yes. Jonah blinked. Yes? Yes. But we do it right. Proper wedding, whole town invited, no rushing. I want the girls to be part of it. I can do that. And you understand, this doesn't erase Thomas. He'll always be their father, always be part of this land. I know, I'm not trying to replace him, just trying to build something new alongside what he started. Evelyn slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, which felt like a sign from a universe that rarely gave them. Then yes, we'll build it together. They married in December, in the community hall the Harrisons had established. The whole valley turned out, families they'd helped, people who'd testified at the commission, neighbors who'd finally found their courage. Mary and Sarah stood up with them, beaming in new dresses Catherine had helped sew. It wasn't a fancy wedding. The food was simple, the decorations modest, but it was real, witnessed by people who understood what it meant to fight for what you loved and win against odds that seemed impossible. Pastor Carlisle performed the ceremony, and Evelyn spoke vows that promised partnership and honesty instead of the traditional obedience and submission. Jonah pledged to honor Thomas's memory while building their shared future, to stand with her daughters as their guardian, to work the land with the respect it deserved. When they kissed, the room erupted in applause, and Evelyn felt something in her chest unlock. Permission to be happy, permission to move forward, permission to be more than just a survivor. The celebration lasted into the night.
People danced, told stories, shared food and hope. Catherine cornered Evelyn near midnight.
You did it, actually did it.
Did what? Beat Lang, kept your land, found love, built a community. Most people don't get one of those. You got all four. I got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You fought when fighting was the hardest thing you could do. That's not luck. That's courage. Evelyn looked around the room at her daughters dancing with the Harrison boys, at Jonah talking with the men who'd helped survey the water, at the families who'd reclaimed their futures. It wasn't just me. It was all of us. True. But you started it. One woman refusing to quit, refusing to accept that losing was inevitable. You showed everyone else it was possible. After the wedding, life settled into rhythms that felt almost ordinary. Evelyn and Jonah worked the land together, made decisions jointly, argued occasionally, and resolved it without disaster. The girls adjusted to having Jonah as a permanent fixture, and gradually, Mr.
Hale became Jonah, became something closer to Pa, though they never quite made the full transition. Spring came, and with it the completion of the mineral survey. The silver deposits were confirmed, not enough for major operations, but sufficient for small-scale mining that could be done sustainably. Evelyn negotiated contracts that protected the water, limited environmental damage, and provided jobs for valley families who needed work. The water cooperative she'd proposed became reality,
with 15 families participating. They shared costs, shared equipment, shared knowledge. Yields increased, debts decreased. Slowly, prosperity replaced desperation. One evening in late May, Evelyn sat on her porch watching the sun set over fields that were green and growing. Mary was reading to Sarah in the loft. Jonah was finishing the day's work in the barn. Everything felt balanced, settled, right. But underneath that contentment, Evelyn carried awareness of how fragile it all was,
how easily it could have gone the other way. How many moments had balanced on knife edges where different choices would have led to disaster? She thought about the 11 cents she'd counted that first morning, about the bread that had appeared on her porch, about the stranger who'd become her partner and then her husband, about Catherine Wells who'd brought evidence, about Billy Simmons who'd risked his father's anger to warn her, about the families who'd found courage in community. So many pieces that had to fall into place. So many people choosing to do the hard thing instead of the easy one. Jonah joined her on the porch, settling into the chair Thomas had built years ago. What are you thinking about? How close we came to losing everything. But we didn't. No, but we could have. One different choice, one moment of giving up, and we'd be gone. True for most things worth having. They require choosing them over and over, even when it's hard. If Evelyn looked at him, you ever regret it? Coming here, getting tangled up in all this? Not once. Even when it was dangerous? Especially then. Gave me purpose again. Reminded me I could be part of building instead of just tearing down. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the valley settle into dusk. Eventually, Mary called from inside that supper was ready, and they went in to eat as a family. Years would pass, and the story of how Evelyn Cross had stood against Victor Lang would become valley legend. People would tell it to their children, embellishing details, turning desperate choices into heroic stands. The truth would blur into mythology, the way truth always did with time and retelling, but the core would remain accurate. One woman, 2 children, 11 cents, and a refusal to accept defeat. A stranger with bread and a conscience. A community finding its spine, and a valley reborn through the simple act of people choosing to stand together instead of falling separately. The land would prosper, the water would flow, the silver would be mined carefully and sparingly. New families would come, drawn by stories of opportunity and fairness. Old families would stay, their roots growing deeper. And on quiet evenings, Evelyn Cross Hale would sit on her porch and remember the morning she'd counted her last coins and thought she'd reached the end. She'd remember the darkness, the fear, the moments when quitting seemed like the only reasonable choice. But she'd also remember what came after. The people who'd stood with her, the strength she'd found when she thought she had none left, the future she'd built from nothing but stubbornness and borrowed courage. That morning with 11 cents hadn't been an ending. It had been a beginning, the moment when survival stopped being enough and she'd started fighting for something more, for dignity, for agency.
for the right to determine her own fate. She'd won that fight. Not easily, not perfectly, but completely. And that victory belonged to everyone who'd chosen courage over comfort, community over isolation, hope over resignation. Years later, when Mary and Sarah were grown with families of their own, they'd ask their mother what lesson they should take from those difficult years. Evelyn would think carefully before answering, knowing that simple platitudes wouldn't capture the complicated truth. Finally, she'd say, "Nobody survives alone. And the people who tell you they did are either lying or forgot the help they received. Accept the bread when it's offered, stand with others when they need you, and never ever believe that losing is inevitable just because winning looks impossible." Then she'd smile and add, "Also keep copies of your important documents. You never know when someone's going to burn down the land office." It would make them laugh, that combination of profound wisdom and practical reality. Which was exactly right, because that's what survival was, holding truth and humor in equal measure, taking life seriously enough to fight for it, but lightly enough to still find joy in it. The Wyoming frontier was harsh, unforgiving, beautiful in its brutality. But it was also home, and Evelyn Cross had learned that home wasn't a place you found. It was something you built, defended, and shared with people brave enough to stand beside you in the building. That was the real victory. Not the land or the water or the silver, but the community forged in fire, the partnerships tested under pressure, the knowledge that she'd faced the worst and found strength she never knew she possessed. Standing on ground nobody could take from her, surrounded by family, earned through choice and struggle, Evelyn Cross had won more than a legal battle or property rights. She'd won her life back, and that was worth everything.